I do hope you can see me today from where you are.
Ich bin ein Lehrling.
If I'm generally anything, I guess I'm generally miserable. This modern world of science and invention is of particular interest to women.
The people, I would say, there is no patent. Would you patent the sun?
I regard myself as a soldier, though a soldier of peace.
Welcome to the Biographers.
Anybody about my podcast, the first thing that I say is I try to be kind of self-deprecating about it and go, and no, before you ask, it is not just one of those, yeah, bro, let's just talk and let's get deep, you know, and like everybody that I'll tell that to will get like a little chuckle because they know that is so many of the podcasts that are out there.
There are a lot of podcasts that are definitely like that. I had a thought and then I lost it. It was totally on point.
Totally related.
It was very related. I don't know. It'll probably come back later. Who knows?
Well, I've got news for you.
What's the
another
news?
thing that I've been saving for the podcast.
So Daniel doesn't text me things because he wants to say it on the podcast.
So I learned from Rob McElhenney on his It's Always Sunny podcast.
Okay.
So him and Glenn and Charlie have all learned that they really are best friends. They've been friends since
just
college.
Don't tell each other stuff.
They will now, because their podcast has blown up. They will literally, one will text the other and go, dude, so I was at the market, and they'll text them back and say,
stop talking.
Save it for the podcast. And they'll like say, don't do it because we want the reaction and the genuine stuff to come on the podcast.
Okay, so now I'm like sitting on the edge of my seat, literally. Well, I am because I'm sitting on the Wu-Tang
Aubrey,
pillow.
What has 2 thumbs and got laid off last week?
Oh, Daniel.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Reduction in force 2024.
Reduction in force, man. I'm part of it. I know.
Oh, no. Well, okay, I'm going to tell you something.
Okay.
Being unemployed is awesome. But I've been applying to a lot of jobs and like I've been finding something, but like I'm not gonna lie, like just having time to not stress about, I gotta go to physical therapy now and I have to worry about seeing if my boss is gonna. I'm not saying that like I'm encouraging people to go be unemployed, but enjoy this moment.
So I'm trying to, and for anybody that's curious, I have zero ill will towards my former employer.
No,
it was
sometimes there's just not enough to happen, and
really
this economy has been so weird for a few years. To be honest, I'm like impressed they didn't have it sooner. Like,
yeah, and
considering how many companies did,
I think there's a lot that I have to be grateful for. They didn't let me go during the holidays. They waited a couple weeks afterwards to say, hey, this is what's going to happen. Unfortunately, the general sentiment was we tried. It couldn't happen. We're moving in these different directions. What's up?
Did you file for unemployment?
Yes. Already.
Good. Yes, you do it immediately. Yes. Anybody out there who gets laid off, because this is a thing that can happen, you file for unemployment immediately.
Yeah, I did that on Monday.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay. The fastest you can do it, the better, because then you're in the system. It's going, because like each week that you miss, it's like you've lost that week. Not that you lose the overall number of weeks that you can get, but that's just something that because I was laid off from a very large global 100 and something year old company in 2015. Anyway, whatever. I filed for unemployment then, and that's when I knew, like, someone told me, like, go do it immediately, like, because you're just missing out on. And the other thing about this, I just want everyone to know this too, because I think people don't realize this. You and your employer have paid into the unemployment insurance. Mm-hmm. It is a benefit that you have already funded. So don't feel guilty getting an unemployment check. You paid for it. Yeah, it is your entitlement that you contributed to. So I know that some people like kind of are like, I don't want to fight. Like there's a stigma or something. And I hope, because I honestly think that like when I was let go so many years ago, I was like, oh, I don't want to file for unemployment. That'll look bad. And I don't even know what that was. It's not bad. It's a benefit that exists for a reason. And especially in a time like this.
I love it. I totally agree. And it makes me think of what like Jon Stewart from The Daily Show, who's been on this political rampage recently, and he's doing a show for Apple and everything. I saw this clip of him talking to somebody about the welfare system. He basically compares it to government bailouts for large corporations and says, oh, okay, so when a big business needs to have some help and they're suffering, so the government comes and gives them a check to help them out of that situation, that's fine, right? But if an individual loses their job and they need to eat and they need to continue to pay for their roof over their head. They're a bum if they do that, huh?
Yeah.
And that's sort of the
That's
joke
the point
and the irony of it
yeah.
or whatever. It's like, no, people, the systems exist for your benefits.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
Obviously if you're abusing the system, that's one thing, but I don't plan to do that myself. I've already applied for probably 6 or 7 or 8 some other
Keep
jobs.
a spreadsheet. It'll make your life really easy because it's I actually there was a week that I had, I don't even know if I basically didn't do my job search activities for a week, but I filled out the form saying I hadn't done it and I wasn't expecting to get a benefit that week. And I just filled it out. And then like 2 months later, they were like, hold on. And they hadn't paid me the benefit.
Okay.
And they're like, hold on, you need to explain this. And I said, well, I said I'm not expecting benefits, and I just filled it out because I was afraid to skip a week. I was afraid they would be like, hold on, you didn't do the week. And so I had to go back and like look at what had happened, and having that spreadsheet was really helpful. And it's so easy. And it's not even like complicated. You just literally put like the title of the job and the company and the date you did it.
Totally.
And then you can kind of keep track because I know that I can't remember everything.
No, I mean, honestly, even like that, I mean, this was 2 days ago, if not the night before. Kat was like, oh, what'd you do today? And I was like, oh, mostly just looked for jobs and applied for jobs and stuff like that. And she goes, what'd you apply for? And I was like,
I don't remember.
Ones that made sense. I just don't even remember what they were.
I think many of us, even like in a working situation or even in a driving situation, you're like 20 minutes later, you're like, what just happened?
Yeah,
like,
you're kind of on. I mean, especially when you're like that hunt mode, you're just like, that's okay. That looks good. That looks good. Okay, yeah. No, I'd be qualified for this. Yeah, okay, yeah. Apply. All right, next. And then you just, that's how I am, anyways. It's just big fit. What am I thinking of? Big net, catch many fish, right?
Yeah. Cast. Yeah, that's the thing. But also, then some people will be like, you got to be rifle, not shotgun, and whatever. I don't even know.
I mean, my thing is, I just want to, keep being interviewing. Just like keep up the cycle. And again, for me, it's a big part of it is I believe in the system of unemployment, but I don't want to abuse the system of unemployment.
Yeah, exactly.
So I want to treat it well and make sure.
Yeah,
that
you
we
treat
can
it well
keep
so that
it
it's
here.
there for you when you need it.
Right, and this is the first time I've ever actually filed for unemployment. So
yeah, well, I mean, I think it's especially among the people we know. I think more people that we know in our age group, generation, industries. Like, definitely this has been happening. So
I agree.
I guess it's a great time to work for the unemployment office.
It is.
Or a terrible time because it's very busy. Anyway, I don't know. Should we talk about something that happened like 100 years ago?
Yeah, like something that actually has to do with our show.
Yeah, sorry. We ramble.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to The Biographers. I'm Daniel Newman, as always, and with me is Boss Lady McCarthy. And I want that to... Oh, no, it should be Hicks now, though, huh?
Yeah, I know.
Boss Lady Hicks. That doesn't roll off the tongue as fun as Boss Lady McCarthy.
I mean, McCarthy's my middle name now.
Is that what you did? Did you, switch it?
I mean, I don't know if I should be telling the personal details of my full name right now on a public podcast. But yeah, no, typically for other advice that people don't know, if you are ever changing your name, it's best to keep your former last name as a name in your name, because then it's easier to prove the chain of changes, because sometimes you'll go somewhere and they'll be like, your name isn't the name we have. And you'll be like, but look at my ID. My name still is there. It's just a middle name now. Huh. Changing your name is a huge PITA.
I am grateful to Kat, my wife, because I asked her before we got married, and I said, I was like, I don't have any, I'm not really a religious person at all, so I don't have anything to stand behind to say, hey, I'd really like you to take my last name. I just was like, I don't have anything for you. It just would mean a lot. And she was like, I understand that. And
that was exactly how Aaron was. It wasn't anything except for he just wants, I don't know. He just wanted that. And
right.
It was just not like a old school bad thing. It's interesting. I've gotten into my next person, which I won't say who it is that I'm going to be researching, but there's some stuff around women and owning property and that I've already been. So it's kind of funny that we're talking about this because I'm not just one of Aaron's properties now. Sometimes we joke, he's like, I fully literally own you now because we got married. And I'm like, no.
That actually was part of the conversation. I mean, not the owning thing, but part of the conversation was Catherine was her, I guess for security's sakes, I won't say her last name either. But she was like, well, I have pride in my last name. There's
I know. It's
weird. Heritage in my last name. And I was like, hey, I totally understand. And if this really means a lot to you, I'm not going to fight you on this because this is just, it doesn't mean enough to me kind of a thing. I was like, it would mean a lot though, and she was like, and I was like, you could think about it. And she did and was like, no, I think it'd be good. I would like to do it. So,
well, it's funny because
she said changing her name was a pain in the butt too.
It is a huge pain in the butt. And I don't know, you guys got married a few years ago and I don't know if she used something, but I used Newly Named, which is a website where you basically put in your information and they'll send you all the forms that you need to change your name, and the steps in the order in which you should do them. And it was actually funny because I was on the website and I was going through this thing and I was like, this UI would be so much better if it had a filter at the top. And so I emailed the support thing and it was the CEO of the company and she's like, we're doing a UI refresh. Thank you. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm such a weirdo. But
shows you worked in tech a long time.
It shows I worked in tech a long time because I'm like, it needs this drop down. But I don't know. I think it was easier because of that, but I still have other stuff to do and it's such a pain. The other thing that's weird is you just don't remember to say your new name. So
yeah, that makes sense.
I was driving as a seasonal driver for a large distribution company that we all know. And I called in to the dispatch center to be like, hi, I've delivered my last package. This is Aubrey McCarthy. And then I talked to the guy and he's like, hold on, what's your last name? And I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. It changed. And he's like, okay. I think he was like, does this person work here?
Right.
But I had to say it a lot because of that, I think, actually. And I think that helped stick it in my brain, say my new last name. But it's definitely weird. And one last thing, and then we can move on. Aunt Mary, because she'll probably listen to this.
Hi, Aunt Mary.
Aunt Mary, she has the name that I had, my dad's last name, her brother's last name. Anyway, she has that name as her middle name. And she's always been Mary McCarthy, new last name. But we still say the McCarthys. And my cousin Caroline has literally never actually been named McCarthy, but it's like the McCarthys. We're just the McCarthys.
It's like my sister. She's on her second. Oh, that sounds bad. She's remarried. Let's say that. That's a much nicer way to say.
She's traded in and for a better model.
Oh, dude, we won't even get into it. But traded in from oh boy, I don't want to be unkind because I hope he's going to get better. But let's just say she's remarried. And I completely lost my train of thought because I derailed so far.
Traded in McCarthy's.
Oh, she will always be a Newman to me. That's all I was going to say. Is that her last name now is something else, but she will always be Newman to me because she's always been a Newman.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we don't ever lose. The other funny thing about that, okay, we've really got to move on. But my mother divorced my father in '93.
Yeah,
but she took the name McCarthy back. Oh. She's McCarthy to this day.
Hey, that was Mabel Dodge. She did that too. She was Ganson, and then she took Dodge from her second husband.
Yeah, Ganson's not part of her. Yeah, you're right.
And then Lujan she took from her fourth husband.
Well, it was partially because my brother and I, all of the friends of ours would be like, Ms. McCarthy, Ms. McCarthy. And so she just was Ms. McCarthy.
Makes sense.
It was just...
I'm okay with it. I like it.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, I guess without further ado, are you ready to get into Ian Fleming Part 5?
3 hours later, yes.
3 hours. 2 hours later. SpongeBob. That always makes me laugh every single time.
We are recording, right?
Yes, we are. Yes,
I always like to check that.
Definitely recording.
I just have this panic sometimes.
Oh, I do too, don't worry. I'm and there are times that it's if I don't save it or something, I'm like, oh,
because sometimes, guys, he has this laptop and it's got the thing, and sometimes the little sound waves are moving and sometimes they aren't, and I'm not sure.
It goes off screen, so you can't see it moving. Anyway.
Yeah, it needs to have a flashing, an on-air light.
Well, it's got there's the red record button is on.
I know, but that looks like it could be where you click to record. It doesn't.
I mean, that's fair.
It's not going.
That's fair. But it is going. We're good.
Cool. Okay. Let's learn about Ian Fleming.
Well, let's get into Ian Fleming Part 5. And for anybody that is curious, this is second to last episode. We're going to have number 6. That'll be the finale here. I'll just sort of say as a blanket statement, there's going to be some stuff I'm going to yada yada over. Because a lot of details that I found about his life, at least that are written about in extreme detail, have to do with stuff like contract negotiations, and who wants to learn about legal, right? That's kind of boring. So I'm gonna yada yada that stuff, but I'll forewarn you, before and afterwards, the stuff that I'm skipping over lightly. But again, this is just to say if this feels like I moved through this section of his life a little faster, it's for those reasons. In the past few episodes, we've covered 4, 5, 6, 7 years of his life. This one might be more 10 to 15 years of his life.
It's like when I got toward the end of Victoria's life and I'm like, here's 2 decades.
I hate to say it, but it's like I feel like a recurring theme I'm starting to discover with people, and I'm not saying this is a rule. This is just a recurring theme I'm finding, is that it's like the first half of the life is spent in the adventure, and the second half of the life is spent
on the adventure,
processing the adventure,
on the adventure, I guess in and on are kind of the same. Yeah, like
whether it's you're writing about it, or you are now sitting in a cabin somewhere living a solitary life, or any of these number of things, or you've sort of like Mabel resolved to this.
So you're
like,
basically
I'm not gonna be
telling
glamorous.
me as I turn 40, this is it.
Life is over for you. Exactly. So
I just read a thing that was like Martha Stewart didn't publish her first cookbook until whenever, and Julia Childs and something else, and I was like, I still have time. We're doing a podcast.
Hey, the more that I learn about it, honestly, well, my point is that it's rarer that the 20-year-olds, the first half of the life is accomplishing. It's a lot of exploration, a lot of adventures.
And the mistakes are where the interest comes.
Exactly. And then the latter half is when it's like, okay, I'm settling down, and now I'm going to achieve with it. Like, that's sort of the theme that I feel like I'm starting to see.
I'm going to find someone at some point. We're going to do their biography, and they are going to have the most boring upbringing. And when they turn 60, things are going to get crazy.
Well, I mean,
we're going to find that person.
I promise we will start to talk about Ian Fleming in a second here, but it's, I heard Seth Rogen recently talking about a guy like Ian McKellen, and how he's like, you never heard of Ian McKellen prior to X-Men or Lord of the Rings. And he was like 65. He was like, that is a testament to a person who never quit. Yeah. And I was like, whoa, that's actually a really cool. And if you look at his history, he had a ton of acting credits before, but you and I didn't know who he was. And that's sort of the point.
And I just thought of Bill Nye, I think. The guy,
science guy?
No, not Nighy. He's in Love Actually, he's the old rocker.
Oh, is it Nighy?
Nighy, maybe?
I think it is.
Anyway, I think I was reading something about him, or actually, we watched the Love Actually 20-year reunion on Hulu, my friend and I did. And he was talking about how he'd been a stage actor. And so, nobody really... He wasn't like famous the way that role made him across the pond, I guess one would say. But he was doing a lot of things. It was just not notable on the level of fame that role gave, because that's an iconic role.
Right.
It's hysterical and amazing.
And it's like, I mean, we're going to get into it in this episode, but it's Ian Fleming is a really good example of this as well, where all the stuff that we've discussed on him so far, right? He worked as a journalist at one point. He worked in the war doing all this insane stuff. He was at Kitzbühel climbing mountains, doing all these different things. All very exciting, but we know him for writing books.
Yeah.
And that's sort of my point, right?
It's all
those building blocks led him to that other point. So,
okay, I'm going to stop talking.
Without further ado, let us get into Ian Fleming Part 5. Now, last time we saw Ian's continued efforts during World War II, which included helping to form the governmental department that would one day form the CIA in the United States, the building of Operation GoldenEye, the formation of 30 Assault Unit, along with its later subgroup known as T-Force. Remember, that was the Nazi schematics they would steal. That was T-Force. Along with the execution of Operation Mincemeat, all before the war came to an end in 1945. Ian is now back in civilian clothing, working as foreign manager for the Sunday Times and spending as much time as possible at his newly acquired property on the North Shore of Jamaica, which he named GoldenEye, if you remember.
I do remember.
That's where I want to go someday. Ian had also been carrying on with his various love affairs, longest of which was Anne Charteris, whose last name is now Harmsworth, after marrying Esmond Harmsworth, 1st Viscount of Rothermere. And occasionally you will hear me refer to her as Anne Rothermere, because he's Lord of Rothermere, so he goes by Esmond Rothermere. Anyway, so just in case you're curious. Anne is, Rothermere / Charteris / Harmsworth. It's all one and the same.
Anne of many names.
Now, where we left off last time, it was March of 1948, and Anne had just learned that she was pregnant. Now, Anne was thrilled to be having another child. She already had 2 children from her first husband, Shane O'Neill, if you remember. She was certain that Ian was the father of her unborn baby, and even told him so. But as she was still married to Esmond Rothermere, she wanted to carry on as if Rothermere was the father.
These things happen.
They happen. Now, this was fine by Ian, and Esmond, who was ignorant to the entire affair, was seemingly elated to be having his first child.
Wait, is this is the husband where, like, he would leave on a business trip and then, like, they would just, like, be like, okay, everybody, we're going to go hang out.
Up in the bedroom.
Okay, yeah, that guy.
Yes,
he was a little oblivious.
Now, we will kind of learn as time goes on. I would say he was quote unquote oblivious, right? I would be willing to bet throughout this entire time he had whiffs of sneaking suspicion.
Some idea.
You know what I mean? I don't think he was a dum-dum. I think he was like, I think something might be going on, but I'm not 100% sure.
He wasn't a highly suspicious person, though, so...
No, and again, I think he was... probably in that situation of wanting to not believe that something is true. So
Denial?
He probably was... Yeah,
Denial.
It's
not just a river in Egypt.
I love it. Now, in August of that year, Esmond took Anne on a holiday to Scotland and decided to invite along a few friends to keep them company. Of course, Ian was one of those friends. Invited for the vacation. As the group sat around their holiday home playing bridge, the 8-month pregnant Anne started to have contractions. She was quickly taken to a hospital in Edinburgh where the doctors determined that a C-section was needed and fast. Little Mary was born premature by a month, and despite all of the best efforts from the doctors, passed away only 8 hours after her birth. Now, when Anne awoke from her medically induced anesthesia...
This was a thing.
Have we talked about this before?
I think we might have, but like our grandmothers probably would have just been put out to deliver babies.
Yes. When we say put out, we literally put under.
Put under.
And more specifically, if I'm not mistaken, the drug that they were given was not a true anesthetic because you couldn't be put truly under anesthetic. It was, for lack of a better term, a mind eraser. So I don't know if this is like TMI or whatever, but my mom told me that my Grams, whom I love to death, she was literally strapped down, wrists and ankles when she gave birth to all three of my mom, my aunt, and my uncle, and that she was screaming and in pain, and it was clear that she was giving birth, but she didn't remember a thing.
So kind of like laughing gas is like you still feel pain, but you don't care,
or you don't process it.
Yeah, you're
just gone somewhere else. That's more or less what they do to you, or they did, I should say. No longer.
Holy yikes!
So again, when Anne awoke from her medically induced anesthetic, she was confused and devastated while Esmond sat beside her bed sobbing in grief. Now, having to keep up appearances, Ian spent the rest of the day golfing, but was mentally beside himself with grief as well. Not only because of the tragedy of his daughter's passing, but because he couldn't be with Anne to provide comfort in such a profoundly sad time.
Yeah.
And this, again, remember, Anne wasn't just like a fling. Ian really did care about Anne, and we're going to see that more as we move forward here. Now, eventually, though, after months of sneaking suspicions, as I kind of mentioned a few minutes ago, Esmond finally worked up the nerve to ask Anne about the true nature of she and Ian's relationship. Now, we don't really know for certain if Esmond knew that Mary wasn't his baby, but it sure seems like he had a strong suspicion. I think he had like a little bit of a fatherly gut when that all happened. Now, Anne dismissed his claims, but Esmond now made the rule that Ian was no longer welcome in their house and specifically forbid Anne from socializing with Ian any longer. And by the way, in case anyone is curious, no, Esmond is not purely a victim here. He too was having affairs with other women on the side, even to the degree that Anne was aware of it and didn't even care.
Yeah, I guess she was like pot calling the kettle black, so like whatever.
That she, I think, was the type of person that was kind of going like, why are you doing this? I thought we both kind of knew, and we were like, it's
okay when you do it, but it's not okay when I do it.
And that was exactly what Esmond was saying. It was basically like, hey, you can't do that, but he was doing that exact same thing at the exact same time. So again, I just wanted to point that out in case anybody's just like, oh, Anne is terrible.
Esmond.
It's like, no, Esmond is cheating on her too. So it's a two-way street.
Sounds like a really, really healthy marriage.
So healthy, right? Now, in response to this order from her husband, Anne took a not-so-discreet vacation to Jamaica with Ian later that year.
I saw that coming from a mile away. She's like, bye.
Which managed to make front-page headlines in a local Jamaican newspaper. Oh. When Lord Rothermere inevitably caught wind, given that he owned one of the biggest newspapers on the planet, the Daily Mail, he finally decided to take legal action. The moment Anne set foot back onto English soil, she was served legal documents from Esmond declaring that if she did not cease her socializing with Ian Fleming, he would be filing for divorce. So like a pre-divorce.
Yeah, it's like a warning shot. I applied to be a process server the other day. So I could have met her on the pier and said, Anne, stay away from Ian. And I'd be in this disguise.
All I can think of when you say that is, have you seen Pineapple Express?
I did, but it was like when it came out. Like, I don't remember.
So it's when James Franco and Seth Rogen are hanging out, and Seth Rogen's James Franco goes, "What do you do, man?" He's like, "Oh, I'm a process server." He's like, "Oh, a servant, like a butler."
No, but I did read actually. Female process servers actually, it's kind of it's a good to be female as a process server because people don't expect you as much.
Oh, I hate to say that I would totally understand that if somebody knocked on my door, I'd be way more inclined to open it if it was just like a girl,
a normal woman,
than like a dude.
Yeah,
and that's weird. I got to process that. Why am I like that? Now I need to look at myself.
Because of your huge machismo and
obviously,
your super sexism,
and I'm just oh god. I'm
a
work in progress, people. I never claimed to be perfect.
I'm surprised you even do a podcast with a woman.
I can't. I'm waiting to be canceled over this episode.
like we're gonna like accidentally have like one soundbite taken out of this.
God, like a stand-up comic who says a joke, and they're like, "Look, they're a racist." I'm like, "No, listen to the joke.
The whole joke is
the
fine.
whole joke is fine." Oh gosh. Okay. Now, I'd also like to note that throughout this time, Ian's health continued to be an issue.
When you're smoking like a chimney and drinking like a fish.
Yes, I was just about to say, if you'll remember, he had picked up a 70 cigarette per day smoking habit, along with consuming a full bottle of gin.
Wait, when we say full bottle, what do we mean? 750 or a handle?
I can't imagine a handle. It's got to be a small, like a yeah, like you go to the store and you're like, oh, a little bottle of gin, and you know it's good for like, for me it would be good for 6 months. For Ian Fleming is good for a day.
Okay.
Yeah. So
that's making my liver hurt.
Oh gosh, and we'll talk more about that as time goes on here. It's a lot of fun.
So he's not feeling so hot.
No.
So he's gonna smoke a cigarette for health.
Now Ian saw a number of different specialists, none of whom could really find anything specifically wrong with him, only suspecting early signs of coronary heart disease. All the doctors did was tell him to try to cut back on the booze and cigarettes and to specifically cut out brandy, port, and liqueurs after dinner.
But what about gin after dinner?
Well, that's a liquor.
You think they were trying to say like just don't drink after dinner, like cut off after dinner?
Well, no, because you can have wine after dinner. I mean, come on, they're not barbarians here. What do you think they are? Are they going to be like, what, sweatpants or something at night? No, they're wearing tuxes, okay? Gosh, Aubrey.
Oh, gosh.
How do you live? Because if it's 5 o'clock, I'm in a tux. I'm like Jack Donaghy.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So try and cut back on smoking and don't drink hard liquor after dinner.
Yes. That was, and beyond that, they were like, dude, we don't know. We can't figure this out.
We cannot imagine what could be causing this.
Need a light that cigarette, sir? Flink.
Did they have autopsies like back then? I mean, obviously they must have. Like They should have been able to see damaged lungs and livers in people who consumed a lot.
I am no expert in this field, so if there are doctors, I mean, dude, I could ask my father-in-law, who's a lung expert, literally a lung expert. This is what he's been doing for 35 years. I could probably go, hey, Dave, if you're listening, let me know if you hear this. I am very curious now that you've said it, Aubrey. How long have doctors known that smoking is bad? And we're talking, this would have been about probably 48.
It's
like
it's close to the 50s. And
close to the 50s.
The other thing though is like, Mad Men and Big Tobacco, they were doing a really good job. They were convincing people that smoking was healthy. It was actually healthy, not just fine, but good for you.
That's crazy.
And the reason I'm remembering this is because like right now they're like, don't have your gas stoves. I think, did I bring this up before? Like,
yeah, last episode.
And like, it's like those marketing companies are amazing.
It's great. But I'd be curious. So Dave, let me know if you hear this.
I too am curious.
Yeah, we want to know. Let us know. Now, things continued on without much serious event for a few years. Ian and Anne continued their secret love affair, occasionally meeting up in Paris or Jamaica, with Anne's excuse to Esmond always being that she was doing some kind of work for the Daily Mail. Ian vacationed in Jamaica, spending extra amounts of time in the ocean, pretending to be a naturalist and writing all about his observations on fish. While not at Goldeneye, Ian continued his work for Lord Kensley and the Sunday Times, even establishing a branch in Moscow to help with reporting. In June of 1950, Ian moved into a new flat at the Carlisle Mansions in Cheyne Walk overlooking the River Thames. And as a fun little aside, just 2 floors below Ian, famed poet, playwright, and essayist T.S. Eliot was living in a throuple with his second wife and a man named John Davy Howard.
Okay.
Pretty wild stuff. Now, Ian's mother, Eve, was now living happily in Cannes, France, where she was enjoying a tax-free lifestyle, enough so that she was able to give Ian £2,000 for moving and decoration expenses for his newly acquired apartment.
How generous of her after cutting him off.
And remember, Ian is now a 42-year-old man.
Okay, and my mom filled my gas tank yesterday.
No. Hey, look. But we're talking about £2,000 in this day's money, which would have been like £50,000.
Yeah, no, I know.
So a little bit different. Hey, if parents can help out, that's great. I am just laughing that Ian Fleming is working for the newspaper, getting paid £300,000 per year. And his mom's like, oh, you need help with moving, darling. And like throws him an extra like $40,000 for furniture and everything. So yay. And by the way, Eve wouldn't be in France for much longer, as in 1951, she would move to the Bahamas and soon marry an old aristocrat.
Oh, well, that's
so
nice.
Just onward and onward.
Didn't she marry someone and have that second baby, though?
Never
or that
married.
extra baby? Oh, she never married him. Okay, I couldn't remember.
And you're just teeing me right up here because... Anyone remember Ian's half-sister, Amaryllis?
Amaryllis, yes, that one.
Well, first of all, Amaryllis she passed away in 1999, a killer cellist.
Interesting.
Remember how we had talked about how she had annoyed Ian so much she would practice all the time? Mm-hmm. Okay, so she became a killer cellist and had won a full-time scholarship to study at the Royal College of Music in 1943. Wow. Okay. Amaryllis had a long and successful career in classical music, and such was the degree of her contributions that in 2009, following some renovations, the Royal College of Music renamed their concert hall the Amaryllis Fleming Concert Hall.
How cool!
Isn't that awesome?
Oh, wow.
The Flemings are all over.
They're everywhere. Very prolific, these Flemings.
Now, as nice as all that is, I bring up Amaryllis because all the way up until 1949, when she was 24 years old, Amaryllis had been under the impression that Eve Fleming was not her real mother, as Eve had always told her that she was adopted.
Oh.
So that means if Amaryllis didn't know, nobody knew.
Huh.
So in 1949, Ian too learned that his supposedly adopted sister was actually his half-sister. Now, I really can only speculate on the reasoning behind Eve's decision to lie to her daughter like this, but regardless, as you can imagine, Amaryllis was severely traumatized upon learning this information, and her relationship with Eve was never the same. The silver lining, however, is that when she learned that her real father was Augustus John, yes, Eve kept that from her too, so Amaryllis never knew who her actual dad was. She began to build up a relationship with Augustus, which soon blossomed, and the reunited father and daughter remained close for the remainder of Augustus's life, who passed away in October of 1961. So kind of sweet.
Yeah, I'm having a lot of thoughts about all of that. I mean, I think obviously the reason that she didn't tell her that she wasn't adopted is because it wasn't good to have babies out of wedlock. I mean, that was... And you can't trust a little kid to keep a secret like that.
I do understand. It's just, it's supremely selfish on Eve's part. You know what I mean? I get it. It's just, I can still understand Amaryllis's hurt by it.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying that what she did was right, but I can understand how and why she did it. And I think that it's a different time, because the other thing is that like stories like that you could take to the grave, but these days there's DNA tests and things like that. So I was even thinking about like baby Mary, who only lived 8 hours. Like, I wonder, like, today you could have done a DNA test, a paternity test and things like that. So, because you basically had 2 men mourning the loss of this child, and you really don't know who it really was. That's true. And I don't know. I have a lot of friends with interesting stories in their families that are similar to this Amaryllis thing, but not like completely, but like a little bit. And my mother even was adopted, and
I think you've told me about this.
Yeah. And so it's just like, you just can't really know what you would do in a situation like that. It's the kind of thing that but I can understand how she would be hurt and confused and upset. I have a friend who found out on the playground that her father wasn't her real father. He was her adopted father from a cousin who had been told and didn't keep the secret. Yeah, and so she goes home crying to her mom and is like, "Dad's not my real dad." And it's like, really, so that's the kind of thing I can see why Eve wouldn't necessarily trust a little kid with a secret like that, because you don't know how it may come out or what it would do. And in the end, it seems like it definitely bit her in the butt, because her daughter didn't have a good relationship with her anymore. Yeah. But still, I can see why in the moment you might do something like that.
Yeah. I mean, I can only speculate here on why Eve did it. It ruined their relationship. So I'm with you. I was not in that position, so I don't know what I would have done.
Will that Ian's father had left about like the rules of maybe it had something. Yeah, it had something to do with that too. Like she couldn't.
But I guess I would say that there was a point though that when Ian was like 25, 27, something like that, and Amaryllis would have been 9 or 10 years old. Eve broke that off, and she went independent. She was like, "Oh no, I'm done with the whole thing of having to rely on Val's inheritance." Mm-hmm. So at that point, I mean, again, I'm not in that position, so I don't know.
We can't know, but
I don't know. But if there was a point where she could have said to her actual daughter, "Hey, you are my actual daughter," that probably would have been the time, because it would have been past the legality of it. But I can only speculate.
I don't know. But then do you drop that on a 9-year-old? I mean, you don't, because it's, you know what I mean? It's like, there's not really a right time to share that information. I guess it would be just from the beginning, but then you run the risk of the will and everything.
That's true.
So it's hard. It's really hard. You have to put yourself in other people's situations.
That's fair.
I mean, a 9-year-old would definitely get screwed up. Then she might not become the world-renowned cellist that she was, because she would have had like a dark moment in her childhood. And
maybe.
Who knows? There wouldn't be the Amaryllis Fleming thing. I'll
Concert
stop
hall at the Royal College of Music. I understand.
Exactly.
Now, by the way, Augustus John, who is Amaryllis's father, was apparently a prolific Lothario with at least 11 children I was able to find record of. But rumor had it that Augustus had fathered more than 100 children in his time.
Wait, what?
Uh-huh. So it is entirely possible that Amaryllis Fleming had over 100 half-brothers and sisters.
That's a lot.
That's a lot.
That's like that guy that was like the sperm bank donor guy, and like they were... I think,
the doctor who like...
Yeah, the doctor who like was so basically has like 500 kids or something. But that... I mean, he didn't do it the old-fashioned way. He did it a different way.
Devious and disgusting way.
I know, but I'm thinking about the guy doing it the old-fashioned way.
Right? Now, in October of 1951, it seems that Esmond Rothermere had finally had enough of Anne's cheating, despite him cheating on her, remember, and decided to file for divorce. This actually turned out to be perfect timing, because just about a month later, Anne learned that, once again, she was pregnant with Ian's baby.
So wait, her husband hadn't had any children at all ever?
No.
So he might have been firing blanks.
He might have been.
Okay.
Entirely possible. With this news and Anne's impending divorce, Ian had no other excuses and finally resolved to getting married.
I guess I'll have to.
Okay. Now, once the new year arrived, the couple packed up once again for Goldeneye, and upon arrival, they firmly decided to tie the knot sooner rather than later. Anne, rightly being nervous about this pregnancy, made a point of taking it really easy and spent most of the time at Goldeneye parked on a comfy beach chair with a massive floppy sun hat for shade and an easel and canvas in front of her so that she could paint the waves and the fish.
I think that sounds like a wonderful way to be pregnant.
That sounds like a wonderful way to be.
Yeah.
Hilariously, though, Anne seems to finally get her first taste of the forbidden fruit that she was so desperately pursuing for 14 years. After spending so much time alone with Ian, accompanied by the ever quickly approaching idea that she and Ian were going to be married, she finally admitted to a friend that, quote, "The deserts of pomposity between the oases of wit are too vast." In other words, the ratio of being a pompous ass to being a witty and funny person were way out of whack.
Oh, gosh. She's like, wait a second. This guy's a jerk.
But sorry, Anne. This is the person you chose. You've literally been whipped by him long enough to know who he is.
Yeah. Well, okay, so I do think about this, though. Every time they were ever together, it was always like a secret rendezvous. So that like kept it interesting and spicy. And then when you like settle down and then you're like, uh-oh, the other shoe's dropped. Uh-oh.
Now, there is a lot going on in a very short period of time for Ian. And you might be thinking, wow, this guy's really taking things in stride. Well, no. Remember all that we have covered on Ian Fleming so far. His strict time at school as a young boy, his turn to a star athlete, his time in Austria where he climbed mountains and skied competitively.
Every time you say that, I like picture like a royal. What's the movie that Wes Anderson and they're like going? It's like they're going up a mountain.
Grand Budapest Hotel.
Yeah, just like picture like some like
yodeling.
Yeah, that's what every time I think of Austria, it's like yodeling.
In addition, though, to his time at the as a foreign correspondent for Reuters, his time banking and stockbroking, his eventual service with the Naval Intelligence Division during World War II, and all the crazy things he did and was a part of, all while being a perpetual bachelor. Add on to all of this, Anne's complicated pregnancy was forcing her to take it easy, and doctor's orders, she was not allowed to be
intimate,
physical with you.
Yeah.
So taking it easy there.
That's not so fun for him.
Not so fun for him. Now, this was a lot to process, and with therapy not exactly being the cultural norm in many places that it is today, Ian needed to find a new way to occupy his mind. On January 15th, 1952, while sitting at his desk in the main room of his house at Goldeneye, Ian sat down at his 20-year-old Imperial typewriter and began to plunk away at the keys. After years of influence, inspiration, experience, and determined creative thought spurred on by the anxiety of looming fatherhood and husbanding, words began to pour out of Ian's brain, through his fingertips, onto the keyboard typewriter, and finally on paper. The first words he wrote were, quote, "Scent and smoke and sweat hit the taste buds with an acid thwack at 3 o'clock in the morning. Then the soul erosion produced by high gambling, a compost of greed and fear and nervous tension, becomes unbearable and the senses awake and revolt from it. James Bond suddenly knew that he was tired. He always knew when his body or his mind had had enough, and he always acted on the knowledge. This helped him to avoid staleness and the sensual bluntness that breeds mistakes."
Well, that's pretty good.
Not bad. That was the first draft, by the way. In case anybody has read Casino Royale, that is not how Casino Royale opens. But nevertheless, with a few strokes of the type bar keys, the secret agent known as James Bond, 007, was born.
There's 2 babies coming out.
Well done. Now, I probably don't even need to say this, but Ian had no idea what he had just created in the juggernaut that would one day become the James Bond franchise. Amazingly, right from the beginning, Ian had all of the character traits of James Bond worked out. Like in the first chapter, after exchanging some witty banter with the mysterious Vesper Lind, Bond decides to name a special martini after her, which he calls the Vesper, and instructs the barman on how to create the drink by saying, quote, "A dry martini, one in a deep champagne goblet, 3 measures of Gordon's, 1 of vodka, half a measure of Quina Lillet. Shake it very well until it's ice cold. Then add a nice large slice of lemon peel. Got it? I just slurred that. I'm sorry. It's hard to read a good quote and do Sean Connery at the same time. Now, one small difference early on is that James Bond drove a 1933 Bentley, not an Aston Martin. But this was mostly because Ian was friends with the designer of that specific car, who was a man named Amherst Villiers, which is a pretty big name in the old car world anyways. Bond himself was a combination of characters that Ian had personally known throughout his life and worked with during the war, like Ernan Dennis, Biffy Dunderdale, Merlin Minshaw, and Peter Smithers, along with Ian himself. Initially, Bond carried a .25 ACP Beretta, which would remain his sidearm for the first 5 novels, but would later be changed after a James Bond superfan wrote Ian a very convincing letter explaining the merits of the Walther PPK, which we kind of mentioned earlier.
That's cool. I didn't know that was because of obviously I didn't know much of anything that you've told me. That's cool, though.
A fan literally wrote to Ian.
A fan changed it.
And the fan said to Ian, this is the funniest part to me, I didn't write this in the script or anything here, but he basically wrote to Ian, was like, hey man, I don't know if you know this, but the .25 ACP Beretta is like, it's kind of a girl's gun. Like, I'm not trying to be mean or anything, but like it's in the world of like people that use these, this is kind of a
lady's gun.
Yeah, it's
is it lighter and smaller
and it jams and there's all these things to it that like if it was an actual secret agent, this would not be the gun he would use.
He would be going with something else.
And so they literally started to correspond, Ian and this guy, and he like through this conversation, this back and forth, he was like, really, in my opinion, if he was going to be using anything, it would be this Walther PPK gun and he explained all these merits, and then Ian went, okay, that makes a lot of sense. I'm going to change that.
Nice.
So pretty cool. Now that fan's name, by the way, was Jeffrey Boothroyd. And if you remember from episode 3 in our series, Boothroyd is the original name of the Q character from the James Bond universe. So Ian named Q in honor of this guy that told him use the Walther PPK.
But so Q doesn't come in until the 6th novel?
So Q, the character was Boothroyd. Q started in the movies. So what happened was originally this guy named Boothroyd. He was the quartermaster for MI6.
But he didn't come along until 6 novels in. Okay.
Yeah, like 5-6 novels in. So I can't remember which one he made an appearance in, but way later.
Boothroyd Q is the one that's like, here are the gadgets, here's the guns.
Yes.
Okay, because I haven't read any of the books.
Yeah.
So I've only seen them, but I guess all the ones that I've seen, like there's always Q. Exactly. And so that's so cool because that's what that person did. Like, hey, I'm an expert in things.
Yeah. So it was
so cool.
So he named him Boothroyd, but then the movie studios, when he was like, we should have him, they were like, Boothroyd's a weird name.
Yeah,
How about just
Q and M
for quartermaster?
Like,
it's catchier. It goes along with the M theme and stuff like that. But that was where the name came from. Was from this guy that said, hey, he should use the Walther PPK. So
cool.
Pretty neat little factoid there. Ian would even add a scene in the first James Bond film, Dr. No, where James Bond's boss, M, forces Bond to give up his Beretta and switch to the Walther PPK. It's true. I was watching it. It's the very first James Bond. It's with Sean Connery, and it's like the first 15 minutes of the movie. He goes and visits M, and M's like, yes, Bond, you need to give up that Beretta. We're switching to the Walther PPK. And like Bond tries to keep the Beretta, and before he leaves the office, M's like, Bond, the Beretta. And he's like, oh, right. And he goes and puts it back on the desk or whatever. So it's like literally Ian put that in the movie specifically to let the fans know of the books, like, hey, we're making the switch. Like for anybody that's offended by the source material or whatever, like we're showing you up front. He's switching from the Beretta to the Walther PPK. So
that just made me think of a really good transition because we just the other day when it was it was like so cold in Colorado. It was nothing degrees. We watched Hunt for Red October, Sean Connery, and because I haven't seen that since I was a kid, but I just love things like that in movies when they're talking in Russian and it's subtitled, and then they say something that's the same in English and Russian, and then that's how they switch all the characters to be able to speak English that are Russian characters.
They did a really good job in Hunt for Red October doing
that was
the whole
so good.
Like we're not going to force all of these actors to try to do a
and
Russian.
it would get exhausting to be. That's a long movie to be watching subtitles for when the target. You know what I mean?
Totally agree.
But anyway, so it made me think of like awesome transition. So that's like a really cool transition in the movie.
I like it.
And Sean Connery.
Obviously, Sean Connery. Sean Connery. Now, for years, spy comics and serials had been popular, but Ian's new character of James Bond was something different. Not just in how Ian wrote the character, but in the full realization of Bond as an actual human being. For better or for worse, Ian wrote Bond very similar to himself, which meant quite a bit of chauvinism, but also sophistication, class, taste, swagger, level-headedness, and just plain coolness. He wasn't a superhero or a mega genius or a perfect role model. On the contrary, James Bond was able to be broken, susceptible to torture, and not without his fair share of scars and bruises. He was cunning rather than brilliant, quick-witted rather than brainy, intelligent but not pretentious, good-natured but a killer, willing to pull the trigger at any moment, always at the service of Queen and country.
He was flawed.
He was. But of course, it wasn't just James Bond as a character that made his first novel special. It was Ian's ability to weave an intricate story with twists and turns all along the way, but never losing his journalistic sense of providing details and sensations to build the environment. Ian also had a great sense for the right times to go against type, with a great example being at the end of his first novel, in which Bond's love interest betrays him, ultimately taking her own life, to which Bond coldly reports back to M by saying, quote, "The bitch is dead now." That's true. That's how the book basically ends.
Spoiler.
If you've ever seen the movie, it's in the movie too. So
I don't know. It's just, sometimes it's been a while since I've seen something and then I don't, I watch it again like, oh yeah. That was the way it was with Hunt for Red October.
I might go out on a limb and say that the Daniel Craig Casino Royale is the best of the Bond films.
Oh, really?
I mean,
is that the one where the building's sinking in Venice?
At the very end.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, and that's not including how terribly great the Sean Connery ones are. If anybody out there revisits any of the 1960s Sean Connery ones, I mean, we literally have a point in You Only Live Twice where they turn Sean Connery into a Japanese man by putting a wig on him and prosthetics, and it's not for like a mission, it's like because he needs to immerse himself in Japan, so they turn him into a Japanese man. It's pretty disturbing. That's what I mean when I say terribly great Sean Connery ones, is that they're so like, oh, you cannot do this like even close anymore sort of a thing. They're hilarious for that reason, in my opinion, but very dated in that way. You'll watch it and go, oh God, that's pretty cringy.
Have you been watching some of these recently?
I've watched all of them.
What are you watching them on?
Most of them are on, I want to say, a combination of either HBO Max or Amazon.
Okay, because I have both of those. Now the number of streaming services equals more than a cable bill. So
almost all of the Sean Connery ones are on that combination of the two. I've tried to watch through a lot of the Roger Moore ones, and they're just so bad. I'm like, I really have, and like some of them are better than others, but they're really not my thing. I've watched one of the Timothy Dalton ones. I've watched all of the Pierce Brosnan ones except for the one where he's with Halle Berry.
I've seen that one, but it's been a long time.
And then I've seen all of the Daniel Craig ones except for the last one that came out, the No Time to Die.
I haven't seen that one either. I feel like it's just because I don't go see movies that much anymore.
Yeah.
And I wanted to see it.
Me too.
But then I was like, I've kind of gotten to this thing lately where when it's something like that, it's like, okay, I want to go back and watch all the ones that led up to it recently or something. Yep. Not like every single Bond movie, but like all the Daniel Craig ones or something. Right. And then it's like, that's a lot. And then I don't do it, and then I just am almost done with Bones.
It's either back to Mean Girls or Bones.
If Emily Deschanel or David Boreanaz is listening to our podcast, I love Bones.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh.
But I only have 12 episodes left, and I'm really sad.
Oh, well, the good news is you can rewatch it, and your life can still go on.
No, maybe I'll start watching Bond movies, or I was thinking about trying, I don't even know what.
I have so many recommendations for you, but we'll get there later.
Hulu wants me to watch Castle.
Castle's really good.
It is? Okay,
really,
because
really, really
looking at it and that guy, I'm kind of like...
Nathan Fillion is one of my favorite human beings ever.
Okay, well then maybe Hulu knows.
You would really like Castle.
You watch The Mental... Actually, no, I watched The Mentalist on Prime, but it's like, it knows. Oh, you liked Bones?
Do you know
watch
what Castle is about?
No.
So it's about... I'm pretty sure I have this right. Okay, so Nathan Fillion is a crime writer. A fictitious crime writer. And
okay, so he's Ian Fleming. No, just kidding.
he's I can't remember the circumstances. They go over it in like the pilot, but for one circumstance or another, he gets brought in to a crime, like a murder crime or something like that.
Something.
Exactly, because they're like, hey, we noticed that in your books it's just like a similar thing. So he comes in to help this agent.
Okay.
And it goes so well that the department says, hey, we would like to bring you on as a full-time consultant to work with these sorts of things.
So it's the same premise as Bones, because
is that what it is?
she's a forensic anthropologist, and she comes in to help the FBI, and then she doesn't get along with Agent Booth, but then like later he needs her again, and then like that's basically what she does for the whole series. And then the same as the Mentalist, because it's like he's like one that can a medium or something, you know, when you like can talk to let me tell your father, your dead father
picks up on the ticks of people and all that stuff.
He maintains through that entire series that is not real. There are no real mediums. But then, you know, they mediums, and then like they meet people who are no, I can talk to the other side. Anyway, but he does a consulting thing because he can read people, and that's how he becomes the consultant.
Well, you should watch Castle. It actually was really, really good. And Nathan Fillion, anybody that knows Nathan Fillion is like they will say the same thing. He's one of their favorites. He's just one of those people that when you see his work. Okay, well then I guess
Castle's probably going to be next for me.
You should, dude. I can only attest. Like I think I watched some of the first season. So if it goes off the rails after a couple seasons, don't blame me.
I won't blame you. I mean, I'll stop if I get bothered by it. But
like it, though.
Yeah, no, because I like that. There's something about a show like that where you kind of it's got a formula. And maybe there's a couple episodes where they have like one serial killer that they're going through. The Mentalist has a serial killer for like many seasons, and it's very good. But anyway, I mean, Bones has that, and then I don't know. So I'll probably like Castle. So Hulu's right.
Check it out. Okay, well, back to James Bond.
Woohoo!
Now, philosophically, too, Ian was fully aware of what he was creating with the entire universe of James Bond, and knew that in order for James Bond to be the quote-unquote good guy, the plots of his enemies needed to be supremely evil. Bond himself even spells it out. Yeah, right? So,
he's kind of flawed and kind of a jerk, but they have to be super bad for you to be like rooting for him.
And we're going to talk about this right now. Okay. Now,
Never thought about that.
even spells it out to the audience at the end of Ian's first book when Bond says to a fellow 00 agent, quote, and I'm not going to read this as Sean Connery because I want you to hear the words. Le Chiffre was serving a wonderful purpose, a really vital purpose, perhaps the best and highest purpose of all. By his evil existence, which foolishly I have helped destroy, he was creating a norm of badness by which, and by which alone, an opposite norm of goodness could exist.
So there has to be bad for there to be good.
So in other words, the bad guys have to be bad enough so as to make the bad deeds of the good guys look good.
Okay.
Right? Mm-hmm. More specifically, Ian knew that James Bond was not a quote-unquote good guy. So in order to make his audience feel as though he was, he had to make the bad guys 10 times worse.
Like super sinister.
Super sinister. This philosophy in writing James Bond worked, to put it mildly.
Well, because I wonder, like, I think about, I don't even know what other book series would have been popular. I mean, the things that are popping in my head are like Nancy Drew and Hardy Boys, and that's for a younger audience than this, but all that stuff. But I wonder how frequently the character, he's not an anti-hero, but he's like, he's not Superman
hero. Right. He's an everyman hero. And I think that's why, and we're going to explore this a little bit more, but I think that's why so many people have connected with the character of James Bond over the years, is that we are all bad people to an extent, right? But we all, I think, the majority of us are striving to do good. Right? Whether that's good for our family, good for our friends, good for ourselves, we're striving to do something good, I think, most of us. So, yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, when I think of all the Bond movies I've watched, he may have done things that are questionable of character, but in the end, you know, his heart is for the greater good. If that makes sense. Like deep down, typically, he's trying to stop the big attack or ultimately do something that's saving lives.
Period, right?
Yeah. Like the greater, just doing things for the greater good.
I think it was basically Ian. If we were to put it shortly, it would be the ends justifying the means, right? And if that's
the phrase I was trying to remember.
If we're trying to create a situation where the ends justify the means, then James Bond going around and willy-nilly just executing security people, sleeping with women, then they die tomorrow because the enemy found out that random woman was sleeping with him, so now we're just going to kill her, and he's going to come back in the hotel room, and every single time James Bond sees that the woman is dead and goes, and walks away. And that is like, I don't think we process that when we watch the fun James Bond action movie, but we're talking about a guy
who's like, that woman was disposable.
Literally looked at a human being as if I could give a crap that you were just executed by my enemies.
Because you happened upon me.
Because you happened upon me. And so when you consider that type of a situation, we don't think about that, right? Because what happened? Well, it wasn't James Bond's fault. It was the supremely evil bad guys that if they were even 10 shades better, they wouldn't kill a random person like that. They're just trying to make money, right? So Ian knew very early on that it was like, James Bond's a jerk. So in order for me to make him look not like a jerk, dude, these enemies have to be saying, we are going to overthrow the world. We're going to kill 3 million people every day until you do this. And so automatically that makes your brain go, okay, whatever you got to do. Because if you got to kill 10 people to save 3 million, fine.
I'm kind of thinking of Marvel right now.
Yeah.
Like, because that sort of chauvinism, they don't have that. Now, obviously in a Marvel movie, you're going to have a big battle in New York City and a bunch of people are going to die, but it's not, and like, yeah, maybe Captain America is going to accidentally do something that accidentally hurts or kills someone that was nearby, but they were going to be killed anyway because of the alien, space people.
Interesting you bring that up because although I didn't care for these movies, there was the Man of Steel Superman movie they made, and then it was followed up with the Batman
with
versus
Henry Cavill.
Yeah,
I didn't see either of those, but I used to think that Henry Cavill was literally the most handsome man on Earth.
I still think he's one of the most
he's
handsome.
He's pretty amazing. It was when he was in The Tudors, and I was like, I had dreams about him.
But what I was going to say is that although I didn't really care for those movies, one thing I did like is that in Man of Steel, no surprise, the end of the movie is this epic battle in the middle of a city and there are skyscrapers crumbling and all this kind of stuff. And the very beginning of Batman versus Superman is basically courtroom trials of them going like, who's responsible for this? Because their people are dead.
No,
buildings are crumbled. Like, who's going to pay for this?
That happened in the Marvel universe too.
Okay,
oh yeah.
I can't remember.
No, there was a point where they were like, we've got to hold the Avengers accountable for everything.
That was like Civil War or Winter Soldier?
Yeah, I can't remember which one, but they were real mad at the Avengers.
Yes. Well, anyways, more or less,
these space people wouldn't be coming if the Avengers weren't there. So
I would make the argument that Ian Fleming invented this entire concept that would then pave the way for these
other films.
That might be unfair.
When did Stan Lee start writing all those?
60s.
Okay, so I wonder if Stan Lee read Bond.
I think I'm probably misspeaking. I would be willing to bet it's much more of a hand-in-hand situation that grew together because I can't say definitively Ian Fleming would have been the person that did this because Superman had been around since the 30s and he had been fighting scientists that were trying to blow up the moon to destroy the planet. So, like...
I'm sorry, I just like the way you say blow up the moon. Like,
but it's
I know
true.
It's true. But it's just
and
like...
so like I can't say that that's really fair about Ian Fleming, but I would say on a much more grounded, less fantastical level of secret agent trying to take down a counter-terrorism agency or whatever, like, yes, I would say more or less he invented that concept.
Yeah, okay.
So
now I want to know if Stan Lee, like...
I know, at least since the mid to late 50s, Stan Lee has been doing comic book, he's passed now, had been doing comic book art, but it wasn't really until the 60s that he got into Marvel and really started to tear it up.
Yeah, I'm definitely more of a Marvel than a DC kid.
Me too.
It's so good.
Now, when I say that words began to pour out of Ian when he started to write, I mean it. A few minutes ago, I mentioned that he started writing on January 15th. By February 16th of that same year, one of Ian and Anne's close friends, a man named Noel Coward, came to visit Goldeneye. Upon his arrival, Ian informed Noel that he had just completed his first novel and wanted him to read it. That novel was titled Casino Royale, as many of you probably know. Ian was so enamored with the writing process that he had averaged more than 2,000 words per day and completed Casino Royale in just 1 month. By the way, Casino Royale is about 62,000 words, if anybody is curious. And for context, as of writing this sentence, I am at just over 33,000 words of writing for this entire series so far. So, what has taken me probably more than 3 months of writing to produce, Ian was able to do double that in a third the time and without references to source like I do.
Yeah, it just came straight from his brain.
I can't believe that. Like 2,000 words a day is, I mean, I don't know, maybe there's some people out there going, yeah, dude, no problem. But like for me, holy crap.
Well, I'm not saying that I could necessarily write 2,000 words per day for a month, but the real thing is that he's coming up with the plot and the characters and all the things too. It's not and just
it's every single day.
But you didn't imply, and maybe he did, but like, I don't know. When I was in English class, they were like, you need to write out your, your timeline and plot and outline and stuff like that, and kind of come up with whatever it's going to be. And I don't know, it doesn't seem like he did something like that.
So I mean,
he obviously was thinking it for years.
That's, I think, what more or less what it was is that he had been sitting on this idea. I mean, in episode, I want to say 3, we talked about, if not 4, we talked about Ian going to the Palacio Estoril Hotel in Portugal. And that was where he got the idea for Casino Royale. And that was like 1942 or 3, I want to say. So, I mean, we're at this point, we're getting close to 10 years past that point that he had been probably sitting on this idea of like, oh, how can we weave in a secret agent trying to steal money from somebody through gambling? Like, it's just a great little idea. And
now he's just waiting for the end of his life to be a dad and just sit around and mow his lawn in black socks. And he was like, I guess I might as well start writing. He had someone to mow his lawn.
Now, his daily routine was simple enough.
Mow the lawn. No, just kidding. I'm sorry. Okay, keep going. Sorry, I'll stop.
He would wake up in the morning, go for a swim in the ocean, have breakfast with Anne, spend 3 to 4 hours sitting at his desk writing, take a nap for an hour, come back at his desk at 5 o'clock to revise his work from earlier in the day and make corrections, and then the rest of the day and the evening was his and Anne's. This regimen was somewhat obsessive for Ian, and he would follow this writing schedule for the next 12 years. I want to share one quote from Ian that resonated particularly with me. A few years later, when he was encouraging his friend Ivor Bryce to write his memoirs, Ian wrote to him saying, quote, "You will be constantly depressed by the progress of the opus and feel it is all nonsense and that nobody will be interested. Those are the moments when you must all the more obstinately stick to your schedule and do your daily stint."
The word that popped into my head was discipline. Mm-hmm. And it's funny, I've been sitting on almost a year here of like time to do something like that. And I definitely have had no real schedule for a while here. I've been traveling and appointments and just all these things. And I think I've said it, but like, I feel like I have a book in me. I just haven't done it like that. You just have to do it. You have to treat it like your job. And
we'll talk about it a lot in this episode, actually, as we move forward here. Really what he's referencing is he's writing to Ivor at a time after James Bond as a series had found success. But make no mistake, and we're again going to talk about this in a few minutes, it was not an overnight success necessarily. And there were ebbs and flows along the way. So yeah, we'll get to it. But for me personally, I don't think I have to explain it a whole lot, but like this endeavor that you and I are going on here, it's a lot of like, do the work, and hopefully it'll pay off.
Yeah, stay the course.
Later, sort of a thing.
Yeah.
So this idea of like, you will be constantly depressed by the progress of the opus and feel that nobody cares and that nobody's interested. And those are the moments where you need to all the more obstinately stick to your schedule and keep going.
Yeah.
And so I have that printed out and written on my monitor upstairs on my computer now.
There you go.
So I reference it because there have been times for sure where I'm just like, oh, does anyone even care about this?
I think so.
Now, by the way, if anyone ever questioned Ian's loyalty to Ivor Bryce, fun little trivia fact for you. Ian named James Bond's best friend, CIA agent Felix Leader, after him, as Ivor's true full name was John Felix Charles Bryce.
Oh, okay.
So Ian took his middle name of Felix and added that for Felix Leader.
I like it.
Now, the last name of Leader came from an American friend named Marion Leader, who is the wife to the heir of the Marshall Fields retail empire, which existed all the way up until 2005 when it was acquired by Macy's.
I remember Marshall Fields.
Remember Marshall Fields? So Marion Leader, so Felix Leader, the CIA agent, that last name came from Marion Leader, who is the wife of the Marshall Fields empire.
Huh.
Pretty crazy, right? Now, to congratulate himself on a job well done with Casino Royale, Ian placed an order for a gold-plated Quiet Deluxe typewriter from the Royal Typewriter Company in America, which cost $174, which I was actually surprised to find only equates to about $2,000 in today's currency.
That's not crazy. We spend that much on computers.
I was
Easy.
like, oh, dude, a gold plate? Okay, right on.
Yeah, like, and our computers are like made of plastic crap.
I know. I also want to say really quickly, it's important to note that it doesn't seem to exclusively be the anxiety of becoming a father and husband that was encouraging Ian to start writing. The year prior, Ian's older brother Peter had written yet another hit novel, this time titled The Sixth Column, and had even dedicated the book to Ian. But the dedication seems to have served as more of a fire under the belly of Ian Fleming, as he didn't seem to care much for seeing his name printed in a hit novel that he had not authored himself.
Yeah, I can see that. It's like, well, the thought was nice, but also, wait a second, this should be me.
Like jealousy, like, dang it, man, that's what I wanted. Now, I did want to bring this up because it is often simplified that Ian created James Bond to get his mind off the anxiety of soon becoming a father. But like often is the case, things are more complicated than they seem. About a month after that, on March 24th, 1952, Ian finally ended his 43-year run as a bachelor and married Anne Charteris, finally making her Anne Fleming. The wedding was a simple affair, taking place at a local courthouse and having just 2 friends in attendance as witnesses. Everyone there wore white, including Ian, who wore a white linen suit and tie, and wore a simple silk dress that had been sewn by a local seamstress. Everything went well except for the apparently rank breath of the wedding officiant, which caused Ian to whisper to Anne halfway through the ceremony, quote, "Do try and keep upwind of him."
Oh, man.
Now, the newlyweds and their 2 friends spent the rest of the evening enjoying a home-cooked meal from Ian's maid, Violet, and subsequently getting pretty smashed on a white rum and citrus fruit concoction that Ian whipped up that he affectionately referred to as the old man's thing. And I do wonder if it was in reference to the original Vesper drink that was served by the Colonel. Because remember, that was like, he remember when the Colonel was
he couldn't remember.
Vespers are served. And it was white rum and citrus. And so I'm wondering if Ian stole the name Vesper and was like, that thing we had there, though, was really good. So he like made his own version and said it was the old man's thing. It was like
copying that old man's thing.
Yeah, he was like referencing the Colonel. That's what I think anyways. I didn't see that written anywhere, but I was like, I think that's what that's in reference to.
That might be it.
I could be wrong about that. And yes, for anyone wondering, Anne got smashed too.
I was wondering that.
Despite her pregnancy, remember people, this was 1952 and nobody really knew much about prenatal care. But spoiler alert, the baby Anne is carrying lives, as we will soon see. So I guess all's well that ends well.
I mean, I think that we didn't really know that was bad until probably the last century, and the whole of humanity has survived.
Yes.
So not that it's good. I'm not saying drink while you're pregnant, but I'm saying like.
But he did the baby survived. So
I also think I read something once that later the alcohol this is totally probably wrong. Early consumption of alcohol is worse than later in the pregnancy or something like that. But that is something I maybe read like 15 years ago. Don't quote me on that.
Gospel, people.
Again, we're not medical. We're not medical.
That's an anecdotal. Maybe, I don't know. I have not heard that though. So
I have no idea what I'm talking about.
Now, not long after this, the couple were back in London and greeted with the task of moving the family. Remember, Anne has 2 teenage sons at this point, into Ian's flat along the River Thames.
Wait, was she still pregnant or she had the baby?
She's still pregnant.
Okay.
Oh, and on top of that, Ian soon learned that he was to get another permanent house guest in the form of Anne's beloved parrot, Jackie, who used to greet her ex-husband, Esmond, by repeatedly shouting, quote, "Old buzzard, old buzzard." Again and again, to which Ian soon found himself as the new target. But in terms of family life, Ian really did love Anne's children and did his absolute best to play surrogate father to them for the remainder of his life. Now, while having dinner with the novelist William Plomer, a few months later, Ian finally let slip that he had finished a novel. After stalling for 2 more months, Ian finally sent over the manuscript to Plomer. Ian tried to be cool and told him that he had hardly used his brain when writing it, and that he thought about throwing it away, and that it was really just a rough outline that he would soon revise. But Plomer saw right through it. Moreover, Plomer liked it. So much so that he sent it off to a colleague at Faber and Faber Publishing named Daniel George, who reciprocated Plomer's enthusiasm for Casino Royale. When George gave it to the tippy-top boss man, he didn't share the same level of excitement, so Ian's brother Peter had to have a personal word with the boss man to reassure him of the book's potential. The boss man was named Jonathan Cape, who founded and owned Jonathan Cape Publishing. Cape was later asked why he intended to publish Casino Royale, to which he replied, quote, "Because he's Peter's little brother," and then paused and added, "And he's got to do much better if he's going to get anywhere near Peter's standard." So it's like straight up his brother was like, "Dude, please, it's a good book." Like,
but also that guy, what if he just said, "You know what, pass"? Yeah. Like, can you imagine? I mean, I'm sure that Ian would have taken it to another publisher, but still, yes. Like.
But if he had passed and then found out later, like, "Oh, I passed on that?"
I mean, it makes me think of, like, you hear stories of, like, I don't know, who was that third guy that founded Apple that, like, sold all his shares and then, like,
heard about that.
Oh yeah, there's a guy that, yeah, he basically walked away, and then there's just, you know, people are like, "Oh, I passed on a script that became someone won Oscars and stuff like that."
I passed on that actor, and then the next movie they made, they were the
biggest actor
George
ever.
Clooney or whatever kind of a thing. Yeah.
So, like, oof.
Yeah. But he did. He was like, "Okay, yeah, let's do it."
Peter got the stuff to, he made it happen.
Now, really quickly, I want to talk about William Plomer. Now, first, let me say that William Plomer was a gay man, mostly closeted, but apparently if you knew him and had read his books, it was pretty obvious that he was gay. I bring this up because Ian Fleming has been criticized for using slurs and generally negative sentiments towards homosexuals throughout his James Bond novels. I'm not trying to make excuses for the guy, but I do want to say that through my research, I have encountered a good number of instances where Ian worked with, socialized with, and was even close friends with quite a few homosexuals. William Plomer was a longtime friend to Ian, and like I said, if you had read Plomer's work, which Ian undoubtedly had, you would see pretty clearly that he was gay, and yet Ian considered him one of his closest friends. Again, I'm not trying to make excuses for the guy, but I wanted to address it, as Ian Fleming has been recently labeled as like some kind of a homophobe, but personally, I just don't believe this to be true. Another good example, I didn't tell this story, but back in the war, there's a point where he goes into a bar during a raid when bombs are falling, ends up having this conversation with what turns out to be a gay man. And Ian learns this because the gay man, as they're talking, shares some poetry with Ian that he wrote. And just Ian listening to the poetry, like, detects that this man is gay. And they start to have this conversation about it. Ian doesn't even care. Goes on, they drinking for hours. And where this ends up going is that because Ian was able to pick up on his sexuality through his writing, Ian said, "You know what'd be really interesting is if we as a war effort used that concept for communication. Where if I said, Aubrey, the rain is awfully heavy today in Cleveland, but if you knew that was code for the air raid is happening above St. Petersburg, that's all code." So Ian invented that idea.
Like, kind of innuendo isn't exactly right, but like
secret meaning.
So, okay.
Right. Like allegory, analogy, basically. But again, that's just another example of Ian having an interaction with honest, easy, friendly interaction and long conversation with this person that openly admitted to him that he was gay, and Ian had no issue with it. So again, I wanted to bring this up because there have actually been editions of James Bond that have been published in the UK that have taken out these slurs and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. I personally believe that Ian wrote that into the character of James Bond because he knew every other person was that way. He knew the general sentiment of men in the time was we don't like gay people.
So he had to like have this macho language in there to not turn off potential readers or something?
I do think so. I mean,
part of me is like, you could just not address it at all.
Totally. Again, I don't want to make excuses. But it's not kind. I just don't believe that when he did it, he was writing from the standpoint of going, this is what I believe.
Right.
I think he was writing from the standpoint of going, this is how James Bond would be.
Well, and I didn't know that people are saying that Ian, or have been more recently saying that he was some sort of homophobic person or something like that. So if that's something you were wondering about clearing up, I do appreciate you saying that because it doesn't seem like he really was. It was more of a sign of the times and some sort of something. Not that it's right, but... Again, a lot of times we say things on this podcast where we're not excusing people's behavior, but we're explaining it.
And also trying to
explain it.
Trying to understand it, I guess, too. Because, again, I think you and I have talked about this a lot, about this whole cancel culture we have where if, you can rewind James Gunn, you find a tweet that he was making fun of a gay person in 2008. And we go, oh, James Gunn's a homophobe and needs to be fired from Marvel and all this kind of stuff. And it was like, whoa, hang on, guys, hang on. We for just a second, we do have to consider... now we can in retrospect go, yeah, we've grown. A lot of us have, at least I hope. We don't feel that way anymore. But there was culturally a point in time where gay people were harassed and they were not accepted. So I think it's just important to know that just because somebody can write about a certain thing doesn't necessarily mean that's what they believe, right? Yeah. You can write fiction and it can be fiction. It doesn't have to be personal truth.
Right.
And I think that's personally... I haven't talked to the guy. He's dead. But personally, I just do not believe that Ian Fleming was homophobic and that he had actual ill will towards gay people personally. Okay. So just wanted to address that because, again, I found many stories, or at least a pretty darn good handful of stories that have led me to believe that to be true, that he's not that way. So anyhow, moving on. In August, after months of discomfort, Anne finally went into labor. The birth was apparently really brutal. After 10 hours of Anne shrieking in pain as baby Fleming refused to enter the world, Ian suddenly announced that he was going to have a smoke break and left the room. In the next room over, the principal dancer of the Royal Ballet, a woman named Moira Shearer, just happened to be resting after recently giving birth when Ian, a complete stranger to her, silently walked into the room. Moira was scared at first, obviously, but as this strange man approached, she noticed, glistening in the moonlight, streams of tears pouring down Ian's face. Without saying a word, Ian knelt down beside her bed, buried his face in the blankets of her hospital bed, and began to weep uncontrollably. Moira instinctively went into mother mode, began rubbing his back and making soft noises to soothe him. After a few minutes, Ian raised his head and looked at Moira, suddenly realizing his intrusion. Taken aback by his own audacity, he said, quote, "Please forgive me, but my wife is having a terrible time next door." Apparently, seeing the love of his life in so much pain was simply too much, even for Ian Fleming to bear. It was Moira Shearer who later recalled this story and said that once Ian regained his composure, they chatted politely and briefly before Ian got up, kissed her hand, and said, quote, "Thank you. You've been such a help." Then left, and they never saw each other again.
Huh. Weird.
I know, right? Thankfully, however, Caspar Robert Fleming was successfully delivered on August 12th of 1952. His middle name, Robert, was an obvious tribute to Ian's grandfather, but his first name, Caspar, was given for slightly more comical reasons. See, years earlier, Ian had established a running joke with one of his old buddies named Ernie Cuneo. The joke was basically that throughout their various readings of novels and poems, not only did they hate seeing the name Caspar pop up, but they generally hated the characters named Caspar. So, Ian and Ernie made a gentleman's agreement that whosoever was first to sire a baby boy, that man would name their child Caspar.
No way.
No joke.
So you were just talking about Felix and now Caspar, and I'm just thinking of like the characters,
cartoon
like
characters.
Yeah.
Now, when Caspar was christened in October of that year, none other than the Right Honorable Countess of Avon, Clarissa Eden, was chosen to be his godmother. Clarissa's maiden name was Spencer Churchill, as she was the daughter of Jack Churchill, Winston's brother. And if you'll remember from episode 1 in this series, Ian's father Val fought alongside Jack Churchill in World War I.
That's very cool.
Full circle. Caspar's delivery proved to be such an ordeal for Anne that she ended up spending the next 2 weeks recovering at the hospital. Ian took the 2 weeks of downtime to be with Anne, love up on his new baby boy, and work on the final draft of Casino Royale while testing out his fancy new golden typewriter. The golden typewriter, by the way, was pretty much for show, as after some light revising of Casino Royale, Ian put it away and switched back to his portable Imperial typewriter. Oh. So it was just sort of like a trophy typewriter that he would mostly have.
That's fine.
Not long after this, Ian began to shop around for a publisher, but not having a literary agent of his own, had to do all the initial legwork. However, thanks to his brother Peter, he was now talking with the publishing house of Jonathan Cape. Ian's experience in the military proved to be useful during contract negotiations with, and this is a bit of a rattle off of numbers, people, so stay with me for a second. Ian received 10% of all sales for the first 10,000 copies sold, then 15% up to 15,000 copies sold, then 17.5% up to 20,000 copies sold, and then 20% of all sales from then on. So he had to like work his way up through selling these books, okay? To sweeten the deal, Ian even saved the publishers on cover art royalties by designing the original book cover artwork for Casino Royale himself. And you can find it online. That's kind of cool, but it's not great. You'll see. It's like, that it works, but it's bare minimum. Okay. Very bare minimum. Amazingly, by October of 1952, just 8 months after finishing the first draft, Ian was signing contracts for the publication of Casino Royale under Jonathan Cape Publishing in the UK. The book was set to be released on April 13th, as per Ian's suggestion, as this would be right around the time that England would be coronating their new queen, Queen Elizabeth II. And the book's title possessing the word Royale, he said, might get swept up into the royal fever and help boost sales.
Interesting.
And this is just a cool little thought for you, Aubrey. As I was researching, I realized that up until like whatever it was 2-3 years ago, James Bond has only ever served Queen Elizabeth II.
Interesting.
Ever. Since his literal first publication, he has only been under Queen and Country. So the next James Bond movie that comes out, he will say for King and Country, and that will literally be the first time in history that James Bond has ever said that.
Huh, cool.
It's amazing. I was like, whoa, Queen Elizabeth's reign was just staggering.
She was like a tough old broad.
Staggering. Now that the contracts were signed, Ian was on to the business of promotion, while on the side doing research for a follow-up novel. He was already moving and grooving. Ian called upon Lord Kemsley of the Sunday Times and Lord Beaverbrook of the Daily Express.
Love that lord.
Both of whom he knew he could count on for a positive and prominently placed review in their newspapers. This, in addition to spreading the good word to subsidiary newspapers and fellow newspaper owners. If anyone is wondering how Lord Rothermere, owner of the Daily Mail and ex-husband to Ian Fleming, felt about Ian's novels, he actually took it mostly in stride, passively mentioning the James Bond novels over the next 10 years, but giving no real opinion. Just sort of like, yeah, and James Bond seems to be doing well. And that would be it. He would just be like,
no smear campaign
no
or
smears,
anything.
no meanness. Like, he just was like, I'm done. I don't care. Just leave me alone. I think that's pretty classy, honestly. Now, in January, Ian and Anne took a brief trip to New York to speak with publishers and collect more research for his next book, before heading to Florida and then Jamaica. After writing so much about the old European dungeons and snobbish gambling houses in Casino Royale, Ian wanted his next book to take place in America, and preferably somewhere tropical and exotic. He also wanted to avoid a stereotypical Italian mob boss as his American villain, so Ian made Bond's next nemesis a hulking black business mogul from Harlem named Mr. Big, which is in one of the movies with, what's his name, Roger Moore, and it's horrible. Anyway,
it's just a bad one.
It's just bad. But
well,
anyway.
I mean, a lot of times with albums and books, like, And movie, like, it's like...
Yeah. The movie is different than the book, though.
Okay, yeah, okay. The sophomore is not as good as the freshman.
The book is good.
The book is good.
The book is good. In the movie, it's very 70s.
Okay.
Very, very 70s. Like pimp stuff.
Okay.
Like it's... Anyway, yeah, it's whatever. Now, as a small side note... Or actually, no, before we get there. Ian dreamt up this character after accompanying some local detectives in New York on a few different patrols and witnessing firsthand what drugs were doing to the community in Harlem. As actually, I didn't really mention this in my writing, but Ian had spent a lot of time previously in Harlem and loved it. Like, he loved all the jazz music and he loved all the art and all the everything. And then now he was going back in like 1952, 1953 and like going, what happened? It is nothing like I remember it being, and it's because heroin basically took over the area. So
I'm just thinking, I don't recall any Bond movies that I've seen, and I've only seen Pierce Brosnan and Daniel Craig, but being in the United States, like I know the one where he's like parkouring is like Mexico or something.
South Africa.
Well,
sure.
Maybe. No, there's definitely one that's
well, there's one that's in Mexico, there's one that's like he's in Spain at one point. He's all over.
Yeah, but it's all Europe or South America. I don't recall a single one in the US.
This one, I'll tell you, I'm going to build up to the title. I'll tell you the title in just a second here. But if you watch the movie of this title, it is all in America. It's in New York. It's in Harlem.
I'm like sitting here going, how did Bond get to the US?
Well, he's an international.
I guess he is an international spy
agent.
So
he's why would he be in South Africa?
I know. Yeah. Touche.
Now, as a small side note, sadly, the National Association for the Advancement of Color People was, at the time, being falsely and maliciously labeled by anti-civil rights advocates as a dangerous communist organization, and Ian kind of bought into this garbage, which helped inspire the character of Mr. Big.
Propaganda.
A little bit of propaganda. But I still don't think it came from a place of true racism, as in the same book, the love interest for Bond is a Haitian woman. Mm-hmm. So I really do think that
Jamaica,
it was...
like, I don't think he's...
Right. I don't think it was a racist thing. It was just a representation of what he wanted to show in Harlem, and that is predominantly black people, you know? So I think that's why he was doing it, and he didn't want to have it as like a wise guy gangster, see? Like, he'd done that. That's been done 1,000 times.
Well, he'd done an Italian mob boss, and then if you do like a wise guy gangster, that's like kind of almost like similar. It's like just on the other side of the pond.
Right. Well, Le Chiffre was French, I want to say, or Austrian or something. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But he just wanted to go off type, basically.
You're making me think of this restaurant called Harlem Public that was like a couple blocks north of where I lived in New York City. That was so good, and I just like want food from there right now.
I just want to go back to New York and just eat my way through New York again because there's just so much.
New York
food.
is a wonderful place to visit and eat.
I just love New York. People fight me on that, but I love New York. It's possibly, it's top 5 favorite places in the world for me, for sure. Now, wanting to tie in the tropical side of America, Ian had Mr. Big illegally smuggling pirate treasure into Florida from Jamaica under the guise of a fish import business. He was tentatively calling his second novel The Undertaker's Wind, in tribute to one of Jamaica's prevailing headwinds. And I am personally really sad that he didn't name it The Undertaker's Wind, because it makes me think of The Undertaker from WWE ripping a huge fart. And for some reason, he is ripping that fart on Dwayne Johnson's big bald head.
Oh, I don't like that. I love The Rock.
I'm okay with The Rock. I used to love The Rock, and now I'm just okay with him. But we won't get into it because he'll come after me.
No, yeah, I don't want you to. I love The Rock. I'm putting that out there.
He's fine. I've read some stuff that it did make me think. Where somebody in this article I was reading was pointing out, they're like, he's the #1 movie guy in the world.
I know,
isn't
that crazy?
The richest guy in Hollywood or whatever, and yet no major film directors want to work with him. And it's generally really hard to get stars to work with him as well.
Oh, I don't know any of that
kind of a thing. And it's not because he's a jerk. It's because, from what I understand, he's incredibly demanding about they're in production, and he'll say, "Nope, it's my way or the highway." But again, I don't know this people. This is not gospel. This is just what I heard from one article.
Have you seen Moana?
Yeah, it's fantastic.
It is fantastic.
It's fantastic. I can't. Oh, dude, he's been in so many good movies. I love the Jumanji one. I loved the Rundown.
Oh yeah, Jumanji.
The Rock is in some great freaking stuff. I'm not
so
trying
good.
to hate on him. I know.
So surprisingly good.
I liked it.
Like that could have tanked hard, but it was actually like
it's
good.
Awesome. I loved it.
Okay, let's keep going.
Now, once in Jamaica, Ian fell quickly back into his daily routine, plunking away on his typewriter with the goal of 2,000 words per day. As many of you already know, the title of his second novel would later be changed to Live and Let Die.
Oh, yeah.
That's the movie that I was building up to, that it's the first Roger Moore movie, and it's not very good.
I'm going to do some math really quick. So let's say that you type 70 words per minute, which is like pretty good. Not like bad, but not good. Like it's not like fast secretary typing, but it's like
easy
fast.
math is that he would spend 3 to 4 hours a day. So if you did 5,000 words divided by, what would that be? 6, 12,
you
18,
said 2,000 words a day.
Yes, 2,000. Pardon me.
So I just did. So let's say we do 70 words per minute times 60 minutes. That's 4,200 words. If you're just cranking. But you got to think of what you're going to write.
Yeah, exactly.
It's one thing to just type and be dictated to.
Exactly. But it's different to actually create, and all of it is from your mind. It's all original stuff.
Yep.
Totally different. Now, after a solid winter vacation in Jamaica, Anne and Ian finally headed back to London on March 14th, 1953. And yes, just Ian and Anne. They had left their 3-month-old son, Casper, back in London under the care of a nanny.
I mean, I guess that's
so
what you
1950s.
That's what amazing. You do.
Now, soon after arriving back in London, Ian was attending one hoity-toity party or another when he happened to bump into a strange and eccentric Frenchman who wouldn't stop talking about his love of the sea. Ian had been overhearing the man talk about his adventures on the ocean, studying marine life aboard his research ship, the Calypso, and even diving to the ocean's floor in small submersible crafts. Ian couldn't help but interject to talk about his own experiences and observations while snorkeling at Goldeneye in Jamaica. And after a brief chat, formal introductions were made. Ian had managed to casually become friends with none other than famed French ocean explorer, marine biologist, conservationist, filmmaker, and inventor of the aqua-lung breathing apparatus, Jacques Cousteau.
I thought that's where you were going. It was either that or Steve Zissou.
Oh, one of my favorites. You gave me the dolphin. You didn't have to do that. It's one of my favorite parts. Willem Dafoe. He's so excited. You put me on the dolphin.
Jacques Cousteau.
He bumps into Jacques Cousteau at a party. Now check this out. After talking nonstop about his fascination with the ocean for some time, Jacques invited Ian to accompany him on his next expedition, which aimed to excavate an ancient Greek merchant ship that sunk off the coast of Marseille, France, somewhere around 250 BCE. Wicked cool.
Wait, what?
They're basically, Jacques was like, oh, dude, we're going to go to Marseille. And we're going to go off the coast and we're going to try to excavate this merchant ship from 250 at the ocean's floor. You want to come?
How would it even still be there?
We're talking about a point in time where, so we have submarines, right? But that's about it. This thing I'm talking about, if anybody doesn't know this, the aqua-lung, it's the apparatus or the device that scuba divers use to breathe underwater. That's what it is, okay? Jacques Cousteau invented that in 1943, I want to say. I might be off by a year or two, but it was early 40s that Jacques Cousteau made that, and it was for himself. He wasn't going, cool, let's make a business. He made it, and he was using it for his own purposes. So we're talking about the first 10 years of human beings being able to breathe underwater on their own. Ian was able to do it.
I guess what I'm trying to say is, how would a boat that's more than 2,000 years old still be on the bottom of the ocean and not have disintegrated?
Oh, I mean, it's like anything else. Things can calcify and then become coral.
Okay.
So, like if there's stone on the ship, if there's iron work on the ship at all, if the crates are filled with certain things, it would all be buried over time as well.
Did they have iron back in 200 BCE?
Oh yeah.
Okay, I don't know.
250 BCE.
I don't think about the Roman Empire.
I mean, at the very least, the Iron Age. I want to say, yeah, you're pretty far into metalworking. I mean, you had chariot races before.
I guess I just think of like wood. Everything wood.
A lot of it was wood, but you'd be surprised. Wood can last for a fairly long time underwater if it's all bolted together and stuff like that. Like those shipwrecks.
I just was surprised that something that old would be still findable.
Well, you're right. I mean, a lot of it would be in ruin, and there'd just be like scraps of it all around. But that's what they wanted to find.
But there might be like treasure, which would have been still there,
or just important history. They would have been able to find out like what were these people trying to bring from Greece to France? Like what was important to them in 250?
So he invites Ian on a little fishing expedition,
and Ian's like, heck yeah. yeah, dude, sign me up. So obviously he does. And for the next 2 weeks, Ian accompanied Jacques Cousteau and his team aboard the famous Calypso research vessel, studying ancient ruins on the sea floor and the fish that surrounded them, with Ian getting early access and use of the incredible aqualung device. Now, this experience would later help Ian form the basis of his 8th James Bond novel, Thunderball, which is from 1961. And if anybody's even seen the movie, the latter quarter of the movie takes place inexplicably with 2 teams of people in aqualungs fighting each other underwater. I don't know why, but it's awesome. I don't know why you couldn't just be on above them and then just electrifying the water or something. But hey, this is a movie and we're having fun. Now, once back in London, Ian was finally able to see if all his hard work, string pulling, and favor asking would pay off in the form of positive book reviews. And as it turned out, it did. The Sunday Times, the Daily Express, the Observer, the Daily Telegraph, the Listener, the Daily Dispatch, and the Manchester Evening all gave positive and enthusiastic reviews for Casino Royale. But Ian's personal favorite came from the Times literary supplement, which read, quote, "Mr. Fleming has produced a book that is both exciting and extremely civilized." Which is pretty cool. This review, of course, was supplied by a former naval officer and a close personal friend of Anne's named Alan Ross, whom Anne considered family. So that helps a little bit.
But you could say it's pretty good. You don't have to go that far out and be it's great.
But it helps when your wife is oh, I've got a guy that I consider family. He'll give you a review.
So for those of you out there who don't know, newspapers used to publish more than once a day. Or some newspapers would be designated for the end of the day.
Yep.
Because there was the evening something that you said in there. And I just wanted to say
it's
that
amazing.
People used to, when a newspaper was printed, you had to get it to the press by a certain time for it to be printed in time for it to be delivered before people woke up. And then there was another deadline that you had to get to for the evening paper as well. And that's just a thing that doesn't exist anymore.
I think it's an interesting thought too, that I think we like to, philosophize on the recent times of us and our collaboration with the internet. How has it changed us as a society? But I hear that and I go, we've never not been starving for constant information. It's that was the point in time where it was if I was alive then, you would bet I would wake up in the morning and go, I'm going to go get the paper because I want to read it. And then when I'd head home after work, I'd go, I'm going to get the new paper because I want to read it. I would be that hungry for that information. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because that's how I am now. I'm constantly trying to find more information and new things to learn about and read about and whatever. If it's videos or whatever.
People used to deliver, they would sell door to door encyclopedias, which if you think about it, were out of date from the moment they went to press.
It's insane.
Actually, probably a month or two before when they went to be edited.
Yeah, dude.
And my journalism degree was for print journalism in wild. 2005. I was still clinging to something that might be, people obviously still write and then it's online and everything. I will say that I used to hate the way your fingers get when you're reading a newspaper.
Dirty.
The print. Yeah.
Jerry Seinfeld in an episode of Seinfeld comments how he thinks that newspapers should include a wet nap.
That's
so
very
you can
clever.
wipe your fingers. And I was like, oh, that actually makes a lot of sense.
So where I worked, my first job out of college was the Northern Colorado Business Report, and we had the morgue. You know what the morgue is?
No.
It's where all of the old issues of the paper, you keep archives of everything and you put them in the morgue.
Oh, okay.
And it was a closet in there and it was organized so that you could go and pull an old issue and everything.
That's pretty cool.
It's just interesting the things that just don't exist anymore.
Kind of makes me sad. Newspapers were so romantic.
Yeah. And remember you'd be were you ever in the paper? When you were a kid?
My hometown local newspaper, yes.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's not like I was in the New York Times or something,
yeah.
but I was in it for, I think it was called the Park Cities People, is where I was in the Three Piggy Opera, and there's a picture of me saying my line into the microphone that was too tall for me, and
It makes me think of if you haven't seen the show that Ricky Gervais made called Afterlife. It is heartbreaking. But it's
I think
really
I started
good.
to watch the first episode of that and I couldn't watch it. I think I stopped.
You have to be a fan of Ricky Gervais, and he's controversial to a lot of people. I personally think he's really funny.
I just watched that one where he's a dentist and he
dentist?
The
Ghost Town one?
Yeah.
That was a good one.
Ghost Town?
That was called Ghost Town, where he's the dentist that he can see the dead people.
Maybe it's called, I don't remember what it was called. I didn't remember it
called.
being called Ghost Town. Yeah, but and then Greg Kinnear is. Yes. That one's pretty funny.
It was really good.
It was like surprisingly funny. Whatever that movie is
I personally
called.
like Ricky Gervais's work, but in that show, Afterlife, I won't give away all the premise of it or whatever, but there's a point, he works for the newspaper, the local newspaper, and he's kind of at a place where he's just totally jaded by life, doesn't care anymore.
So every Ricky Gervais thing,
a little bit to an extent, but it's all. But his thing is always about finding the meaning in that, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not about giving up. It's about okay, but what's past that? How do we move past that and continue on? Which is really why I like him. But he gets to this point where like the mending of the brokenness is after he's forced to interact with all these people in his community. He kind of comes to this thing of okay, well, I think that everybody once should be in the newspaper. And that becomes kind of his like, okay, well then if I'm going to live for anything, it's going to be to find why every single person should be in the newspaper.
is newsworthy.
Yeah, it's very sweet.
That is very sweet.
Anyways.
Sorry, we digress.
Digress for sure. Now, back to Ian Fleming. We were just talking about his reviews after Casino Royale had just been published. Now, Ian continued to be a force to be reckoned with after the publication, demanding more copies in more stores and resources allocated for marketing and advertising from the publishing house. Casino Royale dropped on April 13th, and by the end of May, all 4,750 copies had sold out. During the first 12 months of its release, 3 editions of Casino Royale would be printed due to demand, and although this is most likely a bogus claim, around July, Jonathan Cape Publishing started bragging that a new copy of Casino Royale was being sold, quote, every 6.5 minutes during bookstore hours. It's almost definitely not true, but it's a fun thing to say.
You know, I don't know that that's bogus, because if he was going to make that claim, he would just say every 6.5 minutes. So the fact that he caveated it with during bookstore hours, it makes me think that it's probably actually maybe a thing.
So from what I've read, just the basic math doesn't check out. Like the number of copies that were created,
like total sold,
versus the number of stores in the UK against just general business hours. They were like, there's just not enough books to have been sold.
I mean, maybe they did like 1 week. Like in like a week when it had a big old bump, and they're like, oh, let's do some, because like, come on, we've worked in tech, like we know how metrics are made up.
It's true. and you could be very well right. I don't know, but it seems totally like a marketing phrase.
I'm going to believe that it's true. I'm a gullible, susceptible to marketing.
Well, Ian had finally done it. He had caught up to his brother Peter and written a smash hit novel. Hilariously, Peter was among the early critics of Casino Royale, saying, quote, Ian's thriller starts well, but ends as the most disgusting thing I've ever seen in print.
Ugh. And that, I remember that part. We don't really need to go into the details of the end of Casino Royale, but I do remember seeing that scene where he's in the chair and it's horrible.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, we don't need to go into details, but if anyone's seen Casino Royale or read the book, you know that it's a pretty horrible torture scene, and it's not for kids.
But his brother Peter went on and said, I always knew he was neurotic and tangled, but his novel is reprinted already, which won't happen to my book. a little bit of, maybe a little bit of bitterness. Now, with a smash hit under his belt, Ian now had the upper hand in negotiations with Jonathan Cape Publishing and was able to squeeze them for a 3-book contract and increased royalties that were now 15% up to 5,000 copies and then 20% thereafter. Plain and simple.
I had this, if Jenny is listening, she was my boss at the newspaper in college. She always used to say, easier, not harder. It's like much easier than that original. It was like up to 5,000 copies is blah, blah %. And then to 10,000 copies is blah, blah, blah %.
And that was, why I said, I was like, hang on, I'm going to rattle off some numbers here. But I wanted to do it specifically so that when we got to this point, it was like, he went from that to
simple
15% up to 5,000 copies. 20% thereafter.
So I did have a question though. Was the first run of books 4,750 because they didn't even give him a chance to get to the next level until they had to do a reprint,
and that's
a new edition.
So that's kind of the idea, and that's so from what I understand, and I'm no expert on this, but from what I understand, a lot of book negotiations are like that to this day, where authors may be like, "Yes, I'm with a publishing house, I'm signed," but that still doesn't necessarily mean anything because the first run, if there's no real critical anticipation for the book, they might make a small run, 5,000, 10,000 copies. That's it. If not less these days. I don't really know what publishing numbers are like. And then, oh, you sold those went really well. Well, okay. How fast did they sell out? 2 months? Okay, well, let's do a big reprinting. And you can kind of see like they adjust from there. So it can still be a struggle, even if you're kind of a signed whatever author.
Yeah.
Let's see here. Now, while traveling back to New York aboard the Queen Elizabeth, Ian was able to put the finishing touches on Live and Let Die, which gave him an extra bargaining chip while talking with publishers in the United States. It was on this trip that Ian finally arrived in an agreement with Macmillan Publishing, and Casino Royale would eventually be published in the United States on March 23rd of 1954. It was also during this trip to the States that Ian would become aware of a rising star within the world of American politics, whose historical reputation would one day become infamous, in Wisconsin State Senator Joseph McCarthy.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, any relation?
Not that I'm aware of. I mean, when we went to Ireland last summer, there were so many McCarthys.
Really?
So, yeah, it's like Smith.
I didn't know that. I mean, hey, I've never really thought about it, but I would have figured McCarthy was a Scottish name for some reason.
It's McCarthy is Irish for sure.
What's Hicks? Is Hicks a Scottish name?
I don't know.
I'd be curious.
I don't, and I think that it probably is derative of some other thing like Hitch or who even knows, but because it's also Hix.
Oh, true.
But I don't know. I guess I should figure that out.
Now, if you don't know who Joseph McCarthy was, there is a lot that we won't cover about him. But as an overview, post-World War II, the U.S. government decided that communism was a very real, albeit existential, threat to the core of American values, and appointed Joseph McCarthy as the chairman of the U.S. Senate's Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations, whose purpose was, quote-unquote, uncovering the threats of communism that tried to dismantle America from within. This gave birth to the idea of McCarthyism, which Joseph McCarthy himself described as, quote, Americanism with its sleeves rolled up. Fun stuff. Needless to say, Ian saw this whole thing as a big ol' load of bullcorn, and the gears of Ian's political opinions started to turn. Once back in London, and with a newfound political flame ignited in his belly, Ian spoke with his employer, the Sunday Times, about taking over as the new voice of Atticus for the paper.
Like Dear Abby.
Sort of, actually, strangely.
I mean, yeah. Like, yeah.
Like Dear Abby. Okay,
yeah,
fair enough.
Because there's no one Abby anymore.
Do you know what Atticus is?
A finch. To Kill a Mockingbird?
Character from To Kill a Mockingbird? No. To answer your question, Aubrey, Atticus is a pseudonym used for a weekly opinion and gossip column published in the Sunday Times. It was originally created by British MP and newspaper owner T.P. O'Connor to have his political voice heard anonymously. Atticus has been passed from writer to writer over the years. It still exists to this day, and from 1953 to 1955 was owned by Ian Fleming. Now, T.P. O'Connor, by the way, was a British member of Parliament for over 50 years and is most remembered for spearheading the passing of the 1906 Musical Copyright Act, referred to then as the T.P. O'Connor Bill, which established the protection of musicians' rights. So what happened was TP was inspired to get this bill passed after reading one too many news stories about popular musicians dying in poverty due to theft, of their music. So essentially what was happening at the time is they would release a record and there were no laws that were preventing piracy. Mm-hmm. So people would buy a record, go down to a shop, print out 500 copies, go down to the corner and sell it for 1/10 of the price.
Yeah, it's like the original Napster.
It is.
Remember Kazaa?
Analog Napster.
It's Analog Napster.
Now, I'm not going to go much into Ian's writing under the Atticus pseudonym, mostly because I'm trying to get through this series in 6 parts, but also because most of what he was talking about as Atticus is opinion writing and just isn't very relevant for today.
It's old news.
Old
and
news.
It wasn't even news. It was opinions.
It was. Now that Live and Let Die was finished, Ian set off on writing his 3rd novel, which he already had a name for, Moonraker.
Moonraker.
Once again, he tapped into his network of friends to aid in his research and set to his pace of 2,000 words per day. It was around March, however, that Ian first notes having doubts about the long-term success of his secret agent character, even admitting these feelings to several of his close friends. This was caused in part by Casino Royale finally being released in the US and not flying off the shelves as he had expected.
Womp womp.
Turns out, when you don't have a network of newspaper tycoons to puff up the reviews of your book, you might not get great book reviews.
So it's that trifecta. It's got to be luck, talent, and who you know. And he was missing one of them.
He missed who you know in not Los Angeles, in the United States.
In the United States, he didn't know.
The New York Times thought it was predictable, saying, quote, Fleming leads the weary reader through a set of tough cliches to an ending which surprises no one save Operative 007.
Harsh.
In Cleveland, the Plain Dealer called it rather passé, while the Houston Chronicle called it disappointing.
Why do we care about Cleveland and Houston?
Hey, aren't you from Dallas?
Yeah.
It's Texas.
Okay, that's not the same.
Oh,
Houston is its own country.
Okay, sorry.
It's so far away.
I didn't realize that. But this didn't seem to matter a whole lot, these reviews, that is, as just about a year later, and after much pursuit, negotiations were finally made, and on October 21st, 1954, James Bond made his official television debut in a 1-hour version of Casino Royale, produced and broadcast by CBS in America.
Ooh.
Did you know that?
No.
So compromises were made, like Bond being an American secret agent.
That's like not as cool.
Not nearly as cool.
Although we've got some cool secret agents now. Like
we do now. Jason Bourne.
Yeah, and then what's the one? Jack Ryan. He's in the CIA.
Yeah, Jack Ryan. We got Jack Bauer.
And we got
Jack
Reacher. I was gonna say
we got the trifecta of Jacks.
And then in Meet the Parents, he's De Niro. He's Jack, and he's like Jack talks Thai.
Oh, that's true.
So apparently, all these Jacks. Jack talks Thai.
Jack talks Thai real good. Now, the whole thing didn't impress a lot of people, but they did manage to get Peter Lorre to play Le Chiffre, so that was pretty cool. Peter Lorre is a famous actor.
Oh, wow.
You're welcome.
I'll look him up on IMDb.
You should. Peter Lorre he's one of like the big names of that day, kind of a thing.
Era,
if you look back, it's like, oh, Peter Lorre, no way.
If I mention it to my mom, she'll be like, oh yes, Peter Lorre.
Yeah, exactly. He's one of those people that if you said it to my mom or dad, they'd be like, oh, you don't know who Peter Lorre is? Get out of here, you know.
Kids these days.
I know. The publications in the US continue to be a bit of a struggle, and there was generally a 1 to 2 year lag time in release dates between the UK and the US, but that gap got shorter and shorter over time. Reviews and reception varied from book to book, but Ian persisted in spite of continuing doubts about his own work. As popularity steadily grew, movie studios once again started to knock on Ian's door, but negotiations were slow and complicated. I'm going to skip over most of the movie studio negotiation stuff because, quite frankly, it's a bunch of boring business politics that always seem to happen with movie rights. And to me, it's not all that interesting.
Boring.
So just kind of know that behind the scenes, Ian was always trying to get James Bond sold to movie studios. He got close a few times with a few different studios, signed some early contracts, and that made filming rights complicated in the long run. Now, while not writing his novels, Ian continued to work for the Sunday Times, writing under the Atticus moniker until 1955, and even sporadically for a few more years after that. Ian's health problems now found themselves manifesting in the form of kidney stones, which he would have to get treatment for every few years.
Kidney stones! That's just friends. Young,
oh yeah, where
Joey gets a kidney stone while Phoebe's having babies.
That's right, and then he's like mocking contractions with her, isn't he?
He's not mocking them.
Well, but like he is having the pain, and it's like
and
mirroring.
he thinks it's like sympathy pains, and then like I think there's a scene at the end where she's like gazing at the babies, and then he's like gazing at his little kidney stone like in the jar.
That's right.
Kidney stones. That's the way the doctor said it.
Now, when it came to parenting, sadly, Ian found that he had little instinct as a father. So Casper was primarily left with the nanny in the servants' quarters of the house for most of the day, only coming out in the evenings for a few hours to spend some time with Ian and Anne. But this was all too much for little Casper, who hardly knew his parents and would often run crying back to the nanny in the servants' quarters soon after.
Parents of the year.
Sad. It makes me really sad to think about, to be honest with you. Ian and Anne's relationship was also straining as over the years they continued to drift apart. Anne would regularly host social events at their house, but Ian grew more and more tired of regular socializing and would retreat to a far corner of the house to be left alone and work.
That's what I do.
I totally understand this, to be honest.
People are the worst.
Ian shares his thoughts through James Bond in his fourth novel, Diamonds Are Forever, when Bond speaks about marriage to his love interest, Tiffany Case, by saying, quote, "Most marriages don't add two people together. They subtract one from the other." And I read that plainly because it's a powerful...
It is a really, really good quote. It's a sad quote.
It's a very sad quote.
But it's also, unfortunately, very commonly true.
But it also very much speaks to where his kind of heart was at the time. But anyway, just
it's one thing when you're running around in secret with someone, and then when you actually get married and have a child with them, that's different. The luster wears off.
Yeah, I mean it was doomed from the beginning. It feels like, although they stuck it out. So what do I know? But regardless of this, anytime Ian went off to Goldeneye without her, the two would almost instantly start to pine for each other and begin to write sappy love letters back and forth about how much they loved and missed the other.
Absence makes the heart grow fonder.
It's so interesting because it's pretty clear that these two have like a fairly toxic relationship, but like they still love each other.
You're hot and you're cold. Yes, no.
Oh, is that
Pink? I think.
No, is it?
Or is it Katy Perry?
I thought it was Katy Perry.
It's probably Katy Perry.
I think it's Katy Perry.
Sometimes I get some of their songs mixed up, but you're right. I think you're right. It's Katy Perry.
But don't let any of this fool you. Both Ian and Anne continue to cheat on each other with various people for the rest of their lives.
Well, pot, kettle.
Now, while at Goldeneye, Ian always welcomed guests throughout the years, and around 1955, hosted one of the greatest writers of all time, Truman Capote, whose works include the first true crime novel ever, In Cold Blood from 1959, in addition to the seminal classic Breakfast at Tiffany's from 1958.
Wow.
Pretty wicked. Now, the really big turning point for Ian didn't come until 1957 and the release of his fifth book, From Russia with Love. Throughout his first four novels, a common piece of criticism he received was that he couldn't figure out what kind of writer he wanted to be. And Ian himself admitted that up until this point, he really hadn't taken the story or character of James Bond seriously. Some thought his work was thrilling in an over-the-top sort of hilarious way, and others, like his own wife Anne, would jokingly refer to his work as, quote, pornography.
Everybody's got an opinion, but no one else is writing a book. I mean, I guess his brother was the only one that was allowed to have an opinion, because he'd written books.
True. But every negative reviewer that spoke against Ian all agreed on one thing. His talent for writing was undeniable. So after four novels worth of fun, imagination, and a certain element of silliness, Ian finally started to take himself seriously. From Russia with Love told a slightly more grounded tale, mostly focused on the evil counterintelligence agency known as SMERSH, which despite sounding funny, was an actual counterintelligence agency, and the name SMERSH was coined by Joseph Stalin himself.
Is SMERSH just not funny in Russian or something?
I mean, I would imagine if you're Joseph Stalin...
Is it like a translation thing?
SMERSH. Oh, SMERSH.
Don't laugh at what I'm saying or I'm going to SMERSH you.
I like that too. But yeah, SMERSH, coined by old Joseph Stalin. Now, in the book, Smersh is trying to carry out a revenge plot on Agent 007 for killing 3 of their agents in previous novels. Most importantly, though, From Russia with Love exposed more of Bond's backstory, his personal habits and routines, and painted a much richer picture of James Bond, even being the first book where Bond doesn't win the girl in the end, which really makes the audience feel for him. Nevertheless, Ian still struggled through the writing process, ever doubting the eventual global appeal of James Bond. But just prior to the release of From Russia with Love, the sitting Prime Minister of Great Britain, Sir Anthony Eden, asked Ian if he could use his GoldenEye home in Jamaica for a private vacation, which caused Ian's name and his works to hit national headlines.
Big deal.
Huge deal. This resulted in an unexpected boost in book sales in the UK, giving him a national attention that he had not yet received, which pushed him to continue writing James Bond novels. But he still hadn't managed to capture the attention of us Yanks across the pond.
Well, you know, we're really particular over here.
We're picky, and we also are influenced easily by people that we admire, as we will see here in a second.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that turning point for Ian would still not come for another 3 years. His break, yet again, would come from another member of his vast social network. While in Washington, D.C. visiting longtime friend Marion Leader, Ian was by chance invited to dinner at the house of a Massachusetts senator. And Marion Leader, if you remember, we had talked about her a little bit before. She, the last name Leader, that's Felix Leader's last name that in James Bond. So when Ian created the character of James Bond, he took Felix from Ivor Bryce, and then he took Leader from Marion Leader. So Marion Leader, while he's in Washington, D.C., was like, hey, Ian, I got invited to go to this hoity-toity dinner at this Massachusetts senator house. You want to go? So Ian's like, okay, sure, I'll go along with you. Now, the dinner hosted various U.S. government authorities, and Ian was his usual charming, intelligent self, impressing everyone with his knowledge of world politics and the inner workings of government. The senator from Massachusetts hosting the party was particularly impressed with Ian, not only because of Ian's expert knowledge, but because the senator was actually a personal fan of the James Bond series, having received a copy of Casino Royale while on vacation 5 years earlier from Marion Leader.
How nice of Marion.
So 5 years earlier, when Marion was on vacation with him, she was like, hey, read this new book by a friend of mine named Ian Fleming.
That's how books get popular, too, is just, hey, you should read this. Hey,
that's how
you should read
things
this.
get popular.
Yeah,
is
how
one
things
person
get
says
popular.
to another.
Indeed.
It's like, read this, read that. It's this is good, and then just before you know it, word of mouth catches, and here it is. So for Ian, this whole thing of Casino Royale getting into the hands of this senator was because of Marion Leader.
One might say Marion Leader was a mover and a shaker.
Oh, I like your tie-ins. For anybody that wants to know more about movers and shakers, listen to our series on Mabel Dodge Luhan. Now, as it also happened, that Massachusetts senator was currently a rising star on the U.S. political scene, and about a year from this point, in 1961, would be sworn in as the 35th and youngest ever president of the United States. When the newly elected president was asked by Life magazine to list his top 10 favorite books of all time, he listed From Russia with Love by Ian Fleming as book number 9, which caused an unexpected explosion of popularity that would finally bring James Bond to U.S. audiences and the big screen. That Massachusetts senator, soon to be elected president of the United States, was, of course, John F. Kennedy.
Didn't he also go by Jack?
He did, yeah.
More Jacks.
More Jacks. It's all coming back to Jack.
It's all coming back to Jack.
Isn't that crazy, though? And we'll talk about it a little bit more. But yeah, seriously, again, JFK lists Ian Fleming as book number 9 on his favorite book list, and the U.S.
And
again
people loved JFK.
And we're going to talk about that in the next episode a little bit more. I won't get into it a ton right now, but for anybody that doesn't know, and I'm sure there are many listeners who are probably like they were to some degree alive, maybe children or something when JFK was president. But if you are 20 or 30 or 40 years removed from that situation, it's hard to understand just how impactful JFK was as a cultural figure, not even just a president and a political figure, a cultural figure. So we're going to talk about that in the next episode a little bit. But it really was. He was that popular that his influence, his word, made all these people in the U.S. go,
"Oh, I should
you're
read
reading
that.
Oh,
cool.
I'll read that." Exactly. It was like the new cool thing. It's like Oprah's favorite book or whatever. You know, it's like, oh, this Million Little Pieces guy is great. We'll read it, Oprah. So that's kind of what happened, but it was with JFK.
Okay.
And with that, that is where we will pick back up for part 6, the conclusion of Ian Fleming. We're doing it. I'm doing it in 6. It's gonna happen. I'm almost done with episode 6. I'm like 7 pages into it, and I'm gonna like probably 4 pages more.
Nice.
But yeah, it's good stuff too. There's a couple things in this last episode, at least a couple things that for me were, again, couldn't text you about it because it was so like, no.
I want to share this, but I gotta save it.
Yes. Like, I don't know. For me, anytime I find like these connections to these other things that turn out to be big things, it's just, my little nerd heart just explodes. So it's going to be fun, this conclusion. And then, that also means at the end of next episode, we're going to get to learn who you are researching for your next series.
Very thrilling.
Do you feel like it's snuck up on you? Your next series?
No.
No? Okay. Well, never mind. Good. I thought you were going to be like, oh, yeah, totally. It seems like last month I was just finishing up Queen Victoria.
I don't know. I guess also, like, the holidays happened in the middle of this, so I don't know. But, yeah. I mean, you had a little more time, too, because Queen Victoria was 8 episodes.
True.
And we took a break in this one. So I don't know. Anyway. But, like, yeah. Yeah.
Well, I'm excited.
Yeah, it'll be
fun.
It'll be a change again because I don't want us to ever do someone that's too similar in like either profession or time period
I hear ya.
to the other person that we just did. So jumping around a little bit.
I understand that. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Well, I know who you're doing and I'm excited about it, but I will save that for the next episode and you can announce it.
Yay.
Oh, well, I think this episode might be kind of long. This might be a two hour plus
super long episode.
So sorry, everybody. Hopefully you were able to break this up for your commute or your dish doing or your however you enjoy your podcast.
So long that your dog destroyed a toy.
Yeah. Oh gosh, she did. My dog Rocky, she just ripped the fluff out of one of her toys as we were doing this whole recording.
See, my dog Rooney would be eating the fluff, and then we would be going to the emergency vet later for a blockage.
I think she eats some of it, and she'll have to like pass it after a few days or whatever. But she tends to just rip it and leave it all around the house, so it's great. Thanks, Rocky.
She's sitting adorably in a pile of fluff.
She is. Very
I should take
cute.
a picture.
She is very, very cute. I will say.
She's wagging her tail.
Her little nubbin, her little baby tail. Okay, well, I suppose we'll wrap it up here because we've already taken a ton of time doing this. A couple things that I'll mention first and foremost, some sort of sponsorships / discount opportunities for all of y'all. First and foremost, if anybody out there is looking for any type of knife, kitchen knife specifically is the specialty of my friend here. But if you're looking for a custom hunting knife or a Bowie knife or a folding knife or a gift knife for a friend, anything like that, go online and check out metalworkbymiola.com, MEOLA. That's metalworkbymiola.com. Use the code biographers at checkout. You're going to get 10% off of your order there. And again, I can personally vouch for this work here. A personal friend of mine, and his quality of knife making skill is through the roof. So
I've seen the ones. They're the very nice
amazing.
knives.
It's gorgeous, right? So again, for anybody that's looking for a truly great chef's knife, if you have one, that you got from Target or something like that, not to knock on them, there's some good knives out there. But if you're looking to step up your game, check out metalworkbymiola.com. Next up, I suppose, really quickly, we'll just say go and check out McQueenPipes.com for all of your smoking needs, whether that be, tobacco or vaping or the ganja, as some people are prone to. Go and check out McQueen Pipes, MACQUEEN Pipes.com. Again, use the code biographers at checkout there. You're going to get 15% off. Anything else, Aubrey?
No, I think that's it.
I think we're good.
Excited for next time.
Me too, man. I'm not only am I this sounds strange. Not only am I excited to finish up Ian Fleming because I think it's been a lot of fun, but I already know who I'm doing for my next series, and I'm sort of excited to get into that one. And that one I'm thinking might even be a shorter series, but we'll talk about that later.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Well, everybody, thanks for listening. Again, truly, truly, truly grateful for all the streams we've been getting. As we mentioned earlier, it's been sort of overwhelming and cool, and that kind of continues to happen. So I hope you continue to enjoy our endeavors and our work here. And if you do, we will continue to make it.
And just like Marion Leader, tell your friends.
Tell your friends. And I'll also say that the more that I'm reading up on sort of podcast isms, the more that I hear people saying, like, if we can get reviews and stuff, it helps in the ratings and all that kind of ranking stuff. So if anybody has an extra minute, just put in a little review. That would definitely help us out.
If you feel like you've had a 5-star experience with the Biographers podcast, please leave us a review.
I'm very sheepish about asking for, like, it's like the old joke of YouTube, smash that like button, like and subscribe, bro. Come on, Ham. You support the channel. It's the best way to give us money. Like, okay, come on. I get it. Like, I know if I like your stuff, I'll subscribe and whatever. So, if y'all haven't noticed, I try not to bring it up too much. But anyhow, if you do have an extra second, we'd appreciate it. But I guess with that, we'll let everyone go. Thanks for listening again. Be good to yourselves. We'll see you next time.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
You've been listening to The Biographers. For more information, please visit thebiographerspodcast.com.